Chapter 1409 Forging a Weapon. After appeasing the indignant puppet, Zhongxian headed up to the second floor. The assessment on the second floor wasn't regarding beast tamer, formation master, or the other supporting occupations he was more skilled in but blacksmith. As soon as he entered the room, he immediately saw a young man standing before a cauldron. Holding a fiery red hammer in his hand, he struck a metal ingot relentlessly. Gradually, the metal ingot took shape, and a cold glint reflected off of it. The Tower of Master Teachers required him to choose 8 different supporting occupations, and just so to save him from putting in additional effort in the future, the supporting occupations that he chose were all those which he hadn't obtained the 8-star emblem yet. Ever since he had cleared the 6-star blacksmith examination in Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, he hadn't really touched it much anymore. This would be a good opportunity for him to raise his blacksmith rank up to 8-star. Who? Noting Zhongxian's presence, the young man halted his hammering and introduced himself. I am the inceptive sage of the Blacksmith Guild, Wu Yudao. The test I have for you is extremely simple. I have an ore over there, and as long as you can forge it into a Saint high-tier artifact within a single day, I'll deem you to have cleared my test. As the young man spoke, he gestured toward a weapon cauldron. In the weapon cauldron, Zhongxian found an ore floating amidst a fearsome inferno. The flames were so intense that heat waves rippled relentlessly from it, but even so, the ore still showed no signs of melting whatsoever. Is that the violet firmament blazestone? Zhongxian frowned. The violet firmament blazestone was known to be the hardest grade 8 ore to process. Even 8-star pinnacle blacksmiths would struggle to melt it down and refine it properly. Yet, the young man before him actually wanted him to refine such an ore. It seemed like clearing the Tower of Master Teachers was truly not going to be easy. Nevertheless, there was still an upside to this. While the violet firmament blazestone was extremely difficult to process, it was an incredibly valuable material that could be easily forged into a Saint intermediate tier weapon once refined and forged. Just by using a slightly more refined forging technique, it wouldn't be too difficult to forge a Saint high-tier artifact out of it. In other words, the hardest aspect of the assessment lay not in the forging of a Saint high-tier artifact but the melting and smithing of the ore into a suitable weapon. Indeed. This serves to assess your understanding of processing ores and smithing. If you are unable to melt the violet firmament blazestone within a day, I'll have no choice but to fail you. Wu Yudao replied with a wave of his hand before turning his attention back to forging his weapon, not bothering to pay any heed to Zhongxian anymore. All right. Knowing that this was a part of the assessment, Zhongxian immediately dived straight to work. He activated his Eye of Insight and began examining the violet firmament blazestone carefully. There was no problem with the heat conductivity of the weapon cauldron or the coal fueling the flames, it was just that the melting point of the violet firmament blazestone was way too high. It would require the hottest of the earth flames in order to melt it, and that was a temperature that would be nigh impossible to reach even if a blacksmith were to pump his zhenqi into the flames as quickly as he could. However, the young man hadn't given him a formation to retrieve earth flames to work with, so that would probably mean that he would have to find some way to cope with the current materials he had at hand. This will be really troublesome. It must be said that this assessment was far more difficult than what Zhongxian had expected. Nevertheless, there's no way I could let something like this impede my footstep. Were it to be any other 8-star blacksmith, they might have really felt utter helplessness at the situation. However, to Zhongxian, this actually wasn't too much of a problem at all. He had gone through all of the books in the Blacksmith Guild, so his understanding of smithing had already reached a level comparable to 8-star pinnacle blacksmiths, perhaps on par with some 9-star primary blacksmiths even. Even without using the Library of Heaven's Path, there were at least several dozen methods he had at the top of his head to melt the violet firmament blazestone. With a leisurely chuckle, Zhongxian walked up to the cauldron and tapped his finger forward. Several dozen surges of zhenqi immediately shot forth from his finger and shrouded the flames. Tzzzzzzzzzzzz. Surrounded by Zhongxian's zhenqi, the flames suddenly surged in intensity, as if someone had breathed life into it. The crimson flames began taking on a blue tint, and the astounding heat that it emanated caused even the surrounding air to warp slightly. That is a grade 8 spirit gathering formation? Upon seeing the sight, Wu Yudao halted his forging and exclaimed in astonishment. Most formidable weapons would have unique formations carved onto them in order to reinforce their durability and bolster their fighting prowess. For this reason, most expert blacksmiths were highly skilled in formations too. But to be honest, while he had expected the other party to attempt to toss in some kind of flame catalyst in order to bolster the intensity of the flames, he hadn't thought that the other party would actually dive straight into constructing up a mini spirit-gathering formation. Furthermore, the other party actually managed to construct such a small-scale spirit-gathering formation with just his junchi. And more importantly, he did it within such a short period of time as well. TZZZZZ. With the massive influx of spiritual energy, the temperature of the coal swiftly rose. However, it was still some way off from reaching the level of heat required to melt the violet firmament blazestone. Even though the violet ore reflected a brilliant blue-tinted light, there didn't seem to be too much change to its physical state under the searing flames. It's not a bad idea to intensify the flames in the weapon cauldron by concentrating spiritual energy into it, but it's still insufficient to melt down an ore of the tier of the violet firmament blazestone. Shaking his head, Wu Yudao was just about to turn his attention back to his weapon when the leg of the young man opposite of him suddenly sprung forth, kicking the weapon cauldron straight. Dang! A resounding metallic clang reverberated through the weapon cauldron. In the next moment, the flames within weapon cauldron began swiftly converging together at a single point, as if there was some kind of compelling force attracting them together. It took just an instant for the massive outburst of flames to be compressed down to a size reminiscent of the tip of a sword, and it began slicing the violet firmament blazestone up into innumerable pieces. That is a fire concentration technique? But such a technique would require the cauldron's unconditional assistance. How in the world did he manage to pull it off? Once again, Wu Yudao found himself dumbstruck. Just as the name suggested, fire concentration technique was a skill that allowed one to focus the flames at a single point, thus driving the temperature up to an unbelievable degree. Indubitably, it was an extremely useful and effective technique, but unfortunately, it was a highly demanding exploit for both the cauldron and the blacksmith. The two would require a relationship of mutual trust and impeccable coordination in order to pull off a fire concentration technique. Considering that it had only been several dozen breaths since the young man opposite of him had only met the cauldron, how in the world did they manage to accomplish a fire concentration technique? Just as Wu Yudao was completely flabbergasted by the situation, the weapon cauldron suddenly wobbled its massive body over to him and opened up its lid. A voice so deep that it was reminiscent of the rumbling of thunder echoed loudly in the room, "Lend me your blue incandescent stone for a use." Ah! Not expecting his own weapon cauldron to speak to him in such a manner, Wu Yudao froze on the spot in shock. Before he could even answer, the weapon cauldron had already replied, "Thanks." After which, without even bothering to seek Wu Yudao's agreement, it lifted up one of its tripod foot and stomped on the ground lightly. Hula! An ore immediately flew into its cauldron. Xiong xiong xiong. As soon as the flame came into contact with the blue incandescent stone, the flames immediately burst forth, and the temperature began surging at an insane pace once more. "You are going to snatch my ore for that guy's sake?" Wu Yudao's face twitched non-stop. It had been many years since that weapon cauldron had acknowledged him as its master, and they had been constantly together ever since then. He was only lending it out for the other party's temporary use, and yet, not only did the cauldron coordinate perfectly with the other party to execute the fire concentration technique, it even helped him steal his ore. "Do you still know who your true owner is?" While he was leaping with rage, the cauldron suddenly turned to look at Wu Yudao once more and said, "I'll need your blood now." After which, the cauldron suddenly leaped into the air and descended onto the young man vertically downward. Pu. Struck squarely on his chest, a pool of blood spurted forth from Wu Yudao's mouth and landed right within the weapon cauldron, and the flames intensified for the third time. TZZZZZZZZ. With the multiple surges in the temperature, the violet firmament blazestone was finally unable to retain its state any longer, and cracks began appearing on its surface. Following which, its tough exterior began to soften, showing signs of liquefying. Seeing that it was a success, Zhongxian's eyes lit up. He swiftly shot forth a burst of junchi with a tap of his finger. Hula! The ore in the cauldron immediately flew out, and with the hammer in hand, Zhongxian swiftly hammered on the ore with incredible deftness. 3 breaths later, the forged weapon was plunged into a specially concocted cold fluid. A stream of white smoke rose amidst a resounding sizzle. Soon, Zhongxian fished out the completed product and remarked with a satisfied smile, "I'm done smithing." "You're done." Perplexed, Wu Yudao turned his head over to the completed product, and just a single look was more than enough to send his cheeks into endless spasms. Is that even a weapon? What that was placed on the table wasn't a sword or anything that he would consider as a weapon. It was a perfectly square brick. Chapter 14:10 Grooming Log of the Brickmaster Blacksmith. Be it setting up a spirit-gathering formation to intensify the flames or concentrating the flames together to heighten the heat, the other party had already displayed a deep understanding of manipulation of flames, such that it was very likely that the other party was almost on par with him when in terms of proficiency in smithing. But why would he so slipshod when it came to forging the weapon? That was a violet firmament blazestone. It was an incredibly valuable, or even from the perspective of an inceptive sage like him, even if it wasn't enough to forge a saber or a spear, there shouldn't be too much problem making a dagger out of it. And yet, of all possibilities, he chose to make a brick instead. Wu Yudao's face twitched non-stop, and he felt himself getting a little short on breath from the sheer state of agitation he was in. As the inceptive sage of the Blacksmith Guild, he had something that could be described as an extreme obsession with perfecting weapons. If there were to be the slightest millimeter of imperfection in his forging, he would simply melt down the entire weapon and redo it right from the start. In view that he was assessing another person's work, he had no choice but to tolerate slight imperfections in the other party's work. But this brick didn't have the slightest thing to do with a weapon at all, so how could he possibly accept this? It was not as if the other party was a bricklayer, so why in the world did he choose to forge a brick? You can check on it. It should have reached Saint High Tier. Paying no heed to the frenzied look on Wu Yudao's face, Zhongxian said with a casual wave of his hand. Saint High Tier? The last remark from Zhongxian was the very last straw for Wu Yudao. Unable to tolerate it any longer, he snapped, "What's the use of a mere brick even if it has really reached Saint High Tier?" On the other hand, facing Wu Yudao's questioning, Zhongxian shook his head in disapproval, as if disappointed by the other party's inability to recognize a treasure before his eyes, before picking up the metal brick from the table and said with a hint of pride, "Its uses are far greater than what you can imagine. It would be no exaggeration to say that it's the most formidable weapon in the world." However, those words only seemed to further fan Wu Yudao's rage, and it was to the point that he began laughing out of sheer anger. "The most formidable weapon in the world? Why don't you show me just what is so formidable about the brick you have forged? There should at least be a limit to one's lies. A perfectly square brick, bulky and heavy, lacking in reach and devoid of a sharp edge. How was one supposed to fight with such a weapon? Do you still have any weapon forged out of violet firmament blazestone? Whether my brick is truly strong or not, we'll be able to tell with a swift test." Zhongxian replied calmly. "You want to test out your brick? Temph, let's do just that then." As he said those words, Wu Yudao flicked his wrist and retrieved 3 weapons. Saber, spear, and sword. These were all forged out of the violet firmament blazestone, and the overwhelming cold aura that emanated from them left one feeling as if one's skin had been pierced through and that one's blood was about to freeze over. With just a look, it was apparent that all 3 of those weapons were of extremely high tier, wielding formidable strength. The forging of these 3 weapons had taken Wu Yudao tremendous effort, especially with the processing of the violet firmament blazestone. "As long as any of these 3 weapons of yours is able to withstand the might of my brick, I'll consider it as my loss," Zhongxian said with a smile. "Very well. Let me see what kind of might does that brick of yours wield." Hearing the arrogant words spoken by the young man before him, Wu Yudao harumphed coldly. With a flick of his wrist, his sword flew forth in Zhongxian's direction. In the face of the incoming sword, Zhongxian didn't make any particularly large actions. Instead, with a simple fling of his sleeve, he flung his brick forward to fend against the sword. Catcher! The brick and the sword collided forcefully with one another, and in the next instant, the sword shattered into 2 with a resounding clang. This Wu Yudao widened his eyes in horror. He had reforged this sword time after time in order to refine it into the sharpest and most resilient blade it could be. Yet, against a mere brick, it actually shattered in an instant. How could this be? Who? To make things worse, the brick didn't stop after shattering the sword. It swiftly flew for the saber and spear floating behind Wu Yudao. Catcher! Catcher! Two crisp echoes sounded the end of the other two weapons that Wu Yudao had forged with great difficulty. Why you? Wu Yudao's teeth clattered at that sight, a little overwhelmed by the situation going on before him. It was one thing for one of his weapon to be destroyed so easily, but for all three to be shattered by a simple brick so easily. No matter how slow-witted he was, it was more than obvious to him that there was something much deeper to the simple-looking brick before him. It was at a completely different tier from the other weapons he had forged so far. A brick might lack a sharp edge, but its bulkiness allows it to overcome any weapon through sheer force. Placing his hands behind his back, Zhongxian glanced at Wu Yudao with the air of an unfathomable expert. Weapons are tools intended to raise a cultivator's fighting prowess. Their forms are only of secondary concern, what's truly important are their might. While the violet firmament blazestone allows for the forging of extraordinarily sharp weapons, there is a fatal flaw with such weapons: brittleness. They might still fare fine against other light weapons, but once faced with a heavy weapon, they would swiftly shatter like fragile crystals under the immense pressure exerted on them. Can a weapon that breaks in the middle of a battle be considered as a good weapon? Wu Yudao was stumped by those words. He had used the violet firmament blazestone to forge quite a few weapons, but just like what the other party had said, they were lacking in resilience. But he didn't view this lack in resilience as a major problem after all. There was no way they could be too fragile as Saint high-tier weapons. Furthermore, the strength of a sword lay primarily in its sharpness and flexibility, and it would be impractical to expect it to be resilient as well. He thought that all weapons forged out of the violet firmament blazestone would face this fundamental flaw, but who could have thought that this problem would be resolved easily just by forging a simple brick? How is it? Have I cleared your assessment? Seeing that Wu Yudao was in a state of complete shock, Zhongxian shook his head before asking. He had always been a humble person, and his purpose here was to clear the trial, not to traumatize others, so there was no need for him to add salt to the other party's wounds. Yes, you have cleared my assessment. Wu Yudao replied in a deflated voice, a deep contrast against the confidence he had exuded earlier. With a frown on his face, he asked, there should be no way to carve a formation on the brick, and furthermore, you were rather easygoing and leisurely in your hammerings too. So, how did manage to forge a weapon of this tier? Even with the superior sturdiness the brick wielded over his three weapons, it shouldn't have been possible for it to shatter all three of his weapons so easily. That could only mean that the other party's brick was of a far higher quality of his weapons. In order to raise the tier of a weapon, the regulation of temperature within the weapon cauldron while the ore was being refined and the quenching process were of utmost importance. On the other hand, when it came to heightening its prowess, the forging process and carving of formations would be the key. Generally speaking, the longer an ore had been hammered for, the more compact the material would be. Thus, weapons that had undergone a longer forging process would tend to be considerably more resilient. However, the other party had taken 3 breaths to craft his weapon, using only half a breath to hammer each side of the metal ingot once in order to shape it into the form of a brick. So, how could it possibly be of higher tier than the weapons he had spent hours or even days forging? Are you interested in learning the secret behind my forging technique? Zhongxian asked with a smile. Please enlighten me. Knowing that the other party possessed capabilities surpassing him in the field of smithing, Wu Yudao clasped his fist and bowed humbly, not daring to pull his weight. Even though the forging of the brick would appear simple and crude to untrained eyes, there's actually profound knowledge in it. None of the hammer strikes were done haphazardly, they were carefully controlled to ensure that they are in alignment with the essence of smithing. Picking the brick up, Zhongxian explained with a deep look in his eyes. His understanding of smithing had already reached 8-star pinnacle, not to mention that what he had learned was the Heaven's Path smithing art, so even the most casual of pointers from him could be deeply insightful to any 8-star blacksmith. Just by listening to Zhongxian's words for a while, Wu Yudao was left with nothing but awe and respect for him. Despite the other party's young age, his explanation of smithing was concise and spot-on. Through simple words, the other party was able to bring out the most profound of concepts, leaving him feeling deeply enlightened, as if many epiphanies were striking him one after another. Very soon, the intricacies behind the mysterious brick forging techniques were deciphered to Wu Yudao. Farewell. After finishing his piece, Zhongxian bade his leave and began heading for the third floor. Seeing the young man off with his gaze, Wu Yudao swiftly ran through what he had just learned, and his eyes gleamed in excitement. So, my conceptualization of smithing has been wrong all along. From this day onward, I shall smith swords and sabers no more and dedicate the entirety of my time and effort into forging brick. What swords, sabers, spears? All those meant nothing to the absolute brick. Offering the heaviest of offense and the sturdiest of defense, what other weapons could possibly compete with the brick? This was a weapon that was worth dedicating his entire life into pursuing. With such a thought in mind, Wu Yudao swiftly took out several oars and began forging. On the other hand, the culprit who had just led a talented blacksmith astray was currently heading up a flight of stairs, wondering, I took almost 10 minutes before I could clear the second floor. Is this a little too slow? I'll really have to speed up for the later floors. And soon, he found himself standing before the inceptive sage of the Seer Guild. What was unbeknownst to Zhongxian in this very moment was that he had unwittingly groomed a true brickmaster blacksmith. This was the very day that a certain man vowed that no other weapons other than a brick would be produced by his hands, and countless experts viewed it as the greatest of glory to obtain a brick personally forged by that man. Chapter 14:11 I want to change my clothes, Zhongshe. Upon seeing Zhongxian, the inceptive sage of the Seer Guild quickly greeted him with a clasped fist. Is Elder Feng still doing well? Zhongxian replied the greeting. Back then, while he was in the Shrine of Seers, he had unwittingly destroyed the other party's treasure and tore down the entire place. In the end, he even caused the other party to be struck by lightning too, and that had left him feeling deeply guilt-ridden. He's in the midst of a seclusion at the moment. The inceptive sage of the Seer Guild replied. He seems to be a little down at the moment for some reason. Hearing those words, Zhongxian scratched his head awkwardly. He could still remember the imposing air that Elder Feng carried with him when they had first met, and he couldn't help but feel that he was the cause of the other party's slump. I know that Elder Feng intends to take you in as his direct disciple, but still, as one of the guardians of the Tower of Master Teachers, I can't be going easy on you. This is to uphold the integrity and sanctity of the trial, the inceptive sage said. Of course, I understand. Zhongxian replied with a polite smile. Of the supporting occupations he hadn't reached a proficiency of 8-star yet, Poison Master and Soul Oracle were automatically excluded from the list of choices, so he had no choice but to pick Seer as well. While he hadn't read any books regarding the occupation, he didn't think that it would be too difficult for him to clear its trial. Good. The assessment will be very simple. The both of us shall be divining an event simultaneously, and as long as your conclusion is the same as mine, I'll consider it as your victory, the inceptive sage explained the rules. It went without saying that the assessment for seers would be related to divining. While each seer possessed a different level of ability from one another, as long as their divination was right, they should still arrive at the same conclusion. Understood. Zhongxian nodded. All right. I'll divine that you won't be able to clear the Tower of Master Teachers today, the inceptive sage said with a smile. You are going to divine that I won't be able to clear the Tower of Master Teachers today? Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up. This was a paradoxical statement. Clearly, the other party was intentionally setting up a trap for him. If he were to say something that he would be able to clear the trial, that would be at odds with the declaration made by the inceptive sage, thus spelling his instantaneous disqualification. But even if he were to agree with the inceptive sage and temporarily clear this flaw, the inceptive sage still had the option to choose not to acknowledge his victory later on as long as there was a valid reason behind it. In other words, even if he were to clear the remaining 6 flaws afterward, the inceptive sage could still revoke his acknowledgement under the grounds of his inaccurate divination, and thus, resulting in the overall failure of the trial. This sure was a scheming move. As expected of the inceptive sage of the Seer Guild, he sure knew how to corner others effectively. Indeed. As long as you agree with my words, I'll let you pass right now, the inceptive sage said with a smile. To be honest, even though it wasn't exactly the young man's fault, he still couldn't help but feel that the young man had some blame to play behind the shrine of Seer's collapse and Elder Feng's slump. As the inceptive sage of the Seer Guild, he felt that he should get back at the other party a little. Otherwise, what would become of their dignity as the most mysterious upper nine paths occupation? Can we divine something else instead? Pardon me, but I don't think that I'll be able to answer that question of yours. Zhong Xian shook his head. Unfortunately, this is the only question I have for you, the inceptive sage said with a wave of his hand. The other party possessed the discarnate constitution of divination, which meant that it was impossible to predict anything that had him in the picture. As such, a competition with the other party would simply result in his divination running awry. Since that was the case, he decided to play it foul just this once. And to be honest, he was also very curious to see how the young man whom Elder Feng was so obsessed with would deal with such a situation too. This is the only question you have for me. I see. All right, I understand. Knowing that the other party was intentionally making things hard for him, Zhong Xian shook his head helplessly. With a thought, he accessed the library of Heaven's Path in his mind. Catcher. Before the inceptive sage could process what was going on, his body suddenly went completely numb. A bolt of lightning had fallen on him. Following which, more and more bolts of lightning struck down furiously one after another on the inceptive sage, and before long, he was already lying on the ground convulsing non-stop. What's wrong? Zhong Xian immediately rushed forward with eyes widened in a mixture of astonishment and worry. Have you revealed too many secrets of the heavens that you are suffering heavenly retribution at this moment? Catcher. The inceptive sage could barely force out a single word before another 2 streaks of lightning fell upon him, causing his body to spasm once more. It seems like you aren't in a really good state to assess me at the moment. Since that's the case, it doesn't seem appropriate for me to impose on you any further. If you have no rejections, I'll be heading up first, all right? Zhong Xian clasped his fist. No. Catcher. Under the furious assault of lightning bolts, even speaking a single word was extremely arduous to the inceptive sage. I'll thank you for your magnanimity then. If I have a chance in the future, I'll surely pay you a visit to relay my gratitude to you. Zhong Xian clasped his fist before heading up the stairs. If the other party didn't make things difficult for him, he still could have considered competing fairly with the other party. But since the other party was bent on cornering him, there was no reason for him to hold back either. In the first place, the actions of seers could be considered as not too much different from petty theft from the eyes of the heavens, so the other party was just reaping what he had sowed. You! The inceptive sage exclaimed in agitation, wanting to stop Zhong Xian from heading up. However, he noticed that the lightning bolt above him had grown more compact instead. Horrified, he hurriedly tried to flee, but he realized that no matter how agilely he moved, he was unable to escape from the lightning bolts at all. Eventually, the resigned him could only find a place which was more comfortable for him to lie at, allowing the lightning bolts to ravage him with deadpan eyes. On the 4th floor was the inceptive sage of the Painter Guild. The moment Zhong Xian stepped in, it felt as if he had stepped into an illusory world. Majestic mountains towered around him, creating a particularly aesthetic sight. Knowing that he was in an 8-star painting, it didn't take long for him to escape from it, thus clearing the assessment. The supporting occupation for the 5th floor was terpsichore, the one for the 6th floor was appraiser, and the one for the 7th floor was demonic tunist, and the one for the 8th was apothecary. Having read all of the books for those occupations, Zhong Xian was able to clear those floors extremely quickly. In just a matter of minutes, he was already right before the final floor. Taking a deep breath, he walked toward his final assessment. Since he had already cleared the prerequisite 8 supporting occupation, all he had to do was to clear the final cultivation assessment and he would be able to be promoted as an 8-star master teacher. Pushing the door and entering the room, as soon as Zhong Xian got a clear sight of the person in the room, a tight knit immediately surfaced on his eyebrows. It's you. The person before him was no other than the person who was viciously pummeled by the netherworld azure dragon beast before, the Zhong clan genius who owed him 5 pinnacle spirit stones, Zhong Chun. The Tower of Master Teachers requires an 8-star master teacher to invigilate the trial. Both Luo Shenqing and I were qualified to be the invigilator, but it just happens that he has recently made a breakthrough to Dimension Sundering Realm, thus exceeding the cultivation realm allowable for one to serve as an invigilator here. So, I'll the one who is assessing you today. Zhong Chun chuckled softly. With a flick of his wrist, he took out a jade container and flicked it over to Zhong Xian's direction. Here are the 5 pinnacle spirit stones that I owe you. Catching the jade container, Zhong Xian kept it into his storage ring without bothering to check on it. His eyes remained firmly on Zhong Chun as the knit between his eyebrows tightened. Previously, he had the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast pummel the other party, so it could be said that there was a deep grudge in between the both of them. Now that there was such a good opportunity for the other party to exact vengeance, how could the other party possibly let him go easily? The other party had already expressed his attitude clearly by returning the spirit stones. Now that I owe nothing to you, I no longer need to have any reservations when dealing with you. May I know how will this assessment go? Understanding this fact, Zhong Xian heaved a deep sigh before asking. In order to become an 8-star master teacher, you need to possess strength equivalent to a Saint 6-dan Grand Dominion Realm cultivator. Unfortunately, it appears that your cultivation realm is only at half Grand Dominion Realm at the moment, so I'll have to assess your strength personally to ensure that it has reached the required mark. A sharp glint flashed across Zhong Chun's eyes as he looked at Zhong Xian with a slightly unnerving smile. Rest assured, my assessment will be very easy. As long as you can withstand 3 punches from me, I'll consider it as your victory. If you fail to withstand it, I apologize, but I'm afraid that I'll have no choice but to fail you. Withstand 3 punches from you? Zhong Xian frowned. Considering how the other party had once fought him with his cultivation suppressed, the other party should have known his true fighting prowess. And to propose such a duel despite that, clearly, the other party had no intentions of suppressing his cultivation at all. While Zhong Xian had made considerable advancement in his cultivation and fighting prowess recently, he was still a far way off from matching up to the Saint 7-dan Phantasmal Space Realm pinnacle Zhong Chun. Zhong Xian's mind swiftly whirred into action, but he was unable to find any way how he could clear this assessment fairly. Thus, after a slight moment of silence, he replied, "Fine by me. However, before the duel, I would like to change my clothes." "You want to change your clothes? Feel free." Zhong Chun was a little bewildered by Zhong Xian's abrupt request, but he still waved his hands leisurely, not paying Zhong Xian's request any mind. After all, the crux of a duel lay in one's fighting prowess. It was not as if Zhong Xian would be able to defeat him just by changing his clothes. "Thank you." With a casual wave of his hand, Zhong Xian set up an isolation barrier by the corner of the room and walked in. Chapter 14 12 8-star Master Teacher. Not even 20 minutes have passed so far, right? Within such a short period of time, he actually managed to reach the 9th floor. This. Before the Tower of Master Teachers stood a group of spectating master teachers and members of other occupations, and every single one of their teeth were clattering from astonishment. Their initial thought was that even if the young challenger was able to clear the trial, most likely, he would take several days at the very minimum, needing to overcome many difficulties before finally reaching the top. Yet, who would have thought that he would actually be able to reach the top within less than 20 minutes? This meant that he had received the recognition of the inceptive sages of the 8 supporting occupations within just 2 to 3 minutes after meeting each of them. Was that not too fast? Even though he has successfully reached the final floor, I don't think things are optimistic for him, an elder standing not too far away remarked grimly. "Why would you say so?" Luo Shenqing asked. This brother of his had truly surpassed his wildest imagination. All along, he had thought that there was no one who could possibly best his younger sister's record, but who knew that he would actually be able to reach the final floor so quickly? The final floor was mainly a trial to assess the challenger's cultivation, and considering Zhong Xian's frightening fighting prowess, it should be a walk in the park for him to clear the trial. Why would the elder say otherwise? From what I know, the person guarding the floor is Zhong Chun. I've heard that the both of them had some grudges with one another in the past, the elder said. Zhong Chun? Hearing that name, Luo Shenqing was startled. He could not help but clench his fists tightly together. Why would it be him? He knew about Zhongshen's conflict with Zhongchun as well, and if the latter was the one guarding the floor, it could prove hard for Zhongshen to clear the trial. But under normal circumstances, considering that it was just a simple assessment of cultivation, it would suffice to find an ordinary 8-star master teacher to do the job. There was no need for a top-notch genius of the Zhong clan to make a move himself. I'm not too sure about the details either, but it seems like he applied for the role himself, the elder replied. As one of the core members of the Zhong clan, Zhongchun had a massive intelligence network all over the Sanctum of Sages, allowing him to remain up to date with the various affairs going on. Considering that he had a grudge with Zhongshen, it went without saying that he would apply to become one of the guardians of the Tower of Master Teachers. Damn it. If that fellow makes things difficult for Zhongshen, I'll surely give him a beating he will never forget once he comes out of the Tower of Master Teachers. If I don't make him bedbound for at least half a year, my surname won't be Luo. Luo Shenqing vowed viciously with gritted teeth. He had been wanting to pummel Zhongchun ever since achieving a breakthrough in his cultivation, but before he could make a move, he had ended up learning about his younger sister's affairs, and in the midst of settling the matter, he had been forced to summon his lightning tribulation. In the end, before he could make a move, the other party had ended up making the first move. If that darned Zhongchun intentionally made things difficult for Zhongshen and failed him, he would never let that bastard go. If he did not beat that fellow up till the point where even his parents would not be able to recognize him, his name would not be Luo Shenqing. In the first place, the Tower of Master Teachers is known to be one of the hardest trials in the Sanctum of Sages. If Zhongshe clears it too easily, others will only question the legitimacy of the trial in the future. Shaking his head, the elder was in the midst of his words when the ground suddenly began trembling. Boom! He quickly raised his head and saw a human-sized protrusion appearing on the walls of the 9th floor of the Tower of Master Teachers. Zhongshe has been beaten up, the elder exclaimed. Luo Shenqing anxiously turned his gaze upward too. Boom! Another resounding explosion sounded, and the human-sized protrusion on the wall became even bigger. Stone fragments that had chipped off from the tower rained ceaselessly on the ground. Zhongshen, Luo Shenqing muttered worriedly as he contemplated rushing in to save the other party. However, the next instant, he suddenly noticed something that made his eyebrows shoot up. Wait a moment, that body shape doesn't seem to belong to Zhongshen. The one who is being pummeled isn't Zhongshen. It isn't Zhongshen. Taken aback by those words, the elder turned his gaze upward once more, but before he could examine the protrusion on the wall clearly, the protrusion suddenly burst open. Voila! A silhouette burst forth from the protrusion, heading straight to the ground. Peng! He fell headfirst into the ground, leaving only a pair of legs trembling non-stop outside, reminiscent of a leek planted in the ground. Judging from the clothes and the body shape, he was none other than the top-notch genius of the Zhong clan, Zhongchun. How can this be? The elder's mouth opened wide in shock. He knew Zhongchun's strength very well. Even at St. Seven Dan Pinnacle, he wielded strength that was comparable to ordinary half-dimension Sundering Realm experts. Yet, facing a mere half-grand Dominion Realm cultivator, he was actually pummeled right down from the 9th floor, even to the point where he was unable to gather the strength to steady himself through his ability of flight. The elder rubbed his eyes forcefully, and he had to take several good looks at the situation before he was finally able to convince himself that he was not seeing things. The elder was not the only one who was flabbergasted by the situation. Even Luo Shenqing's eyes were wide open. Zhongchun had been viciously pummeled the previous time he challenged Zhongshen with his cultivation suppressed. Could it be that he still had not learned his lesson and chose to suppress his cultivation yet again? If that was the case, he really was a true masochist through and through. Boom! However, before he could think too much into it, the ground suddenly shook. A brilliant light burst converged from the surroundings toward the top of the Tower of Master Teachers, and a token materialized in midair. 8-star Master Teacher emblem. Congratulations to Zhongshen for successfully clearing the Tower of Master Teachers and being promoted to 8-star Master Teacher. The voice reverberated throughout the Sanctum of Sages, echoing loudly in everyone's ears. Zhongshe, has cleared the 8-star master teacher examination. Within a certain room, Zhong Zhouxiao heard the voice from the sky and froze on the spot. At the same time, the cultivating Chen Liao's body also stiffened, and a hint of disbelief surfaced in her eyes. The other party was only at St. Four Dan Primordial Spirit Realm Pinnacle when they first arrived at the Sanctum of Sages, possessing a fighting prowess that was beneath hers. But in less than a single month, he was already an 8-star master teacher. Even when witnessing everything unfolding with her own eyes, she still could not help but find it inconceivable. Such scenes were happening throughout the entire Sanctum of Sages, especially with those cultivators who had entered the Sanctum of Sages together with Zhongxian. Shock was an understatement for what they were feeling at that moment. Even Zhao Xingmo was completely rooted to the spot, incapable of speaking a word at all. He had known from the very start that Zhongxian would accomplish great things in the future, but he had never thought that the latter would actually be able to become an 8-star master teacher within less than a month, and without attending a single lesson at that. As an 8-star master teacher, that young man could already be considered a figure that stood at the very peak of the continent, qualified to enter the inner sanctum. Senior, sure is formidable. Feng Zi's mouth was agape, too. Previously, he had still thought that as long as he worked hard, considering that they were from the same lineage, he would be able to surpass the other party one day. However, the voice had clearly told him that the other party had already reached a level far beyond his reach, and it was nigh impossible for him to catch up now. It's no wonder teacher would choose to take him in. With the other party's talent, it was no wonder his teacher would take in another disciple even after telling him that he would be the only direct disciple that he would accept. Who? Reaching out to grab the floating 8-star master teacher emblem, a unique energy surged into Zhongxian's body. Of course, there was no way he would be a match for Zhongchun given his current strength. The reason he had been able to defeat the latter so easily was because he had let his clone out to take his place. After absorbing the energy from the lightning tribulation, his clone had become so strong that even a Saint 7 Dan pinnacle expert like Zhongchun was bashed right into the wall with a single punch. By the third punch, the latter had already been completely knocked out, falling down from the tower of master teachers helplessly. I have finally reached 8-star. Glancing at the emblem in his grasp, Zhongxian could hardly suppress the excitement in his heart. Just as he was about to stow it into his storage ring, his eyebrows suddenly shot up, and a token surfaced in his palm. The Sanctum Head Token. The token was emanating a warm glow, and it seemed like a seal placed on it was gradually undoing itself. Chapter 14:13 The location of vicious upper body. There were 3 conditions required to unsealing the Sanctum Head Token. Firstly, his master teacher rank had to reach 8-star. Secondly, he had to cultivate his Eye of Insight up to the 4th realm, Demon Vanquisher. Thirdly, his cultivation had to reach Saint 8 Dan. He was still some way off from accomplishing the latter two, but with his master teacher rank reaching 8-star, he had already managed to activate a portion of the authority and strength harnessed within the Sanctum Head Token. Knowing that this was not a good time for him to check on the changes in the Sanctum Head Token, he swiftly stowed both the token and the 8-star master teacher emblem into his storage ring before slowly descending down from the top of the Tower of Master Teachers. Zhongshe, congratulations on clearing the Tower of Master Teachers trial and breaking its record. Zhongshe stepped forward and clasped his fist. Even at this point, he still could not help but feel as if he was in a dream. To clear all 9 floors within 20 minutes, winning the acknowledgement of 9 top geniuses of their Sanctum of Sages, that was a feat that even the little princess of the Luo clan was incapable of. If I may ask, am I qualified to enter the inner sanctum now? Zhongxian asked with a polite smile. Of course. If you wish to head there now, I can bring you over, Zhongshe said with a nod. To tell you the truth, there isn't much of a difference between the inner sanctum and the rest of the Sanctum of Sages, perhaps except for the concentration in spiritual energy. I understand, but I would still like to head there. I'll be troubling you to lead the way then, Sanctum Head Zhong. Zhongxian clasped his fist. At the other party's insistence, Zhongshe nodded with a hint of approval in his eyes. The young man had just challenged a major trial, but he still insisted on heading to the inner sanctum instead of resting. Perhaps it was the difference in attitude that made the difference between him and the rest of the student. With such a thought in mind, He turned around and led the way forward, and Zhongxian quickly followed him. Zhongshe. Seeing that Zhongxian was leaving, Luo Xianqing hurried forward, wanting to talk to the young man about the matter concerning his younger sister. But at the last moment, he stopped himself. Facing Zhongxian's perplexed gaze, he waved his hand and said, "It's fine. You should take a look around the inner sanctum first. I'll look for you later at night." Considering that he was going to entrust the young man with a mission to kill the person whom his younger sister loved, he would have to ensure utmost secrecy for this matter. There were many experts present on the scene, some of them were adept in soul arts even, so it would be best for him to find the young man later on and speak to him in a more private environment. After all, this was not a particularly honorable matter to speak of in public. All right. Zhongxian swiftly assessed Luo Xianqing carefully and noted that the other party's cultivation was already fully reinforced. He nodded with a bright smile before following Zhongxue to the inner sanctum. The inner sanctum of the Sanctum of Sages was not located in any of the 5 halls but within a lake far away from the major infrastructure. Zhongxue took out an insignia and waved it over the lake, and the seal cast over the lake swiftly came undone. Following which, a massive gate surfaced from the depths of the water, and particularly overwhelming spatial energy rippled forth from it. What formidable control of space! Zhongxian's eyebrows shot up in astonishment. He had already comprehended the 3-dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, which granted him a deep insight into the essence of space. But to his shock, even with the eye of insight, he was actually unable to see through the gate before him. This could only mean that the person who had set up the door had achieved a level of spatial manipulation comparable to 4-dan heavenly art of dimension unravel or perhaps even 5-dan. Folded spaces created by experts of that caliber were extremely steady, such that putting aside perceiving it, even if he really found their folded spaces, he would be unable to open them without using keys such as the insignia that Zhongxue had used. This is the insignia required to open the doorway to the inner sanctum. All students of the inner sanctum have one, and it serves as a representation of their identity, Zhongxue said as he passed the insignia over to Zhongxian. Taking the insignia, Zhongxian lightly stroked its surface to feel its material before taking a closer look at it. There was a dense congregation of inscriptions on its surface, and surprisingly, these inscriptions bore a striking resemblance to the seal in the subterranean gallery that was used to cut off the otherworldly battlefields from the master-teacher continent. They were marks of a spatial formation. Dripping a droplet of blood on it to claim ownership of the insignia, Zhongxian placed it in his storage ring. "All right, let's enter," Zhongxue said as he led the way in, and Zhongxian quickly followed suit. The moment Zhongxian stepped through the door, he felt as if he had been transported through space. Before he knew it, he was already standing within a building. The very first thing that he noticed about his surroundings was that the concentration of spiritual energy was nearly twofold of that in the Sanctum of Sages. It was so concentrated that it felt as if it would form liquid spirit essence with just a simple grasp of his hand. What was incomparably valuable in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy turned out to be commonplace here. "It's indeed a blessed land for cultivation," Zhongxian remarked. The higher the concentration of spiritual energy, the faster one would be able to cultivate. With how dense the concentration of spiritual energy was, even if one did not actively cultivate, the spiritual energy would still dive into one's body through one's acupoints of its own accord, pushing one's cultivation up gradually. If Zhongxian had been there right from the start, even without using a single spirit stone, he would still be able to reach his current level of strength within a single year, or perhaps even higher. It was truly no wonder there were so many outstanding young experts in the sage clans. With decent talent and the best resources at their command, they would have to be a true sluggard to not achieve anything at all. Noting Zhongxian's astonishment, Zhongxue explained with a smile, "The most valuable resource in the inner sanctum isn't the higher concentration of spiritual energy but the cultural atmosphere. Just by being here will grant one greater clarity of thoughts and a sharper spirit, thus enhancing one's rate of cultivation and learning." Zhongxian pondered for a moment after hearing those words before nodding. The inner sanctum had been set up by ancient sage Bo Shong personally many years ago, and he had infused Kong Shu's will into this very space. This will had been further enhanced by the countless geniuses who had studied and cultivated there over the past several dozen millenniums, thus creating a unique atmosphere in the area that made one subconsciously desire to learn, cultivate, and reach greater heights. After allowing Zhongxian some time to soak in the area's atmosphere, Zhongxia said, "Let's go and pay our respects to Sage Kuei's sculpture first." Sage Kuei's sculpture? Zhongxian asked with a hint of confusion. Even though the folded space was set up by ancient sage Bo Shong, it's mainly due to Sage Kuei that it survived up till now, grooming many generations of expert. Zhongxia explained. As you know, folded spaces are inherently unstable, and this is especially so for spaces such as this that harness such concentrated spiritual energy. In order to prevent any mishap from happening, some kind of order must be actively sustained in here, and if not Sage Kuei's efforts over the many years, the inner sanctum would have long collapse. Zhongxian nodded in response to those words. In a sense, folded spaces could be compared to balloons. If they were not maintained carefully, putting aside growing larger, they would even slowly deflate as time went by. The only reason the myriad ant hive nest, for example, had been able to remain so stable so far was due to the myriad ant hive queen sustaining it. Otherwise, it likely would have collapsed long ago. The same went for the mountain gate. It was due to the dissipation of Sage Kuei's will that resulted in its swift collapse afterward. Considering how spiritual energy was even more aplenty within this folded space, it went without saying that it would be even more prone to instability. There was no way such a space could be sustained for several dozen millenniums without a powerful will guarding it. Soon, the both of them arrived before a massive sculpture. The sculpture was dressed in a long robe, and there was a particularly gentlemanly and refined look on his face. He shared the exact same appearance as the Sage Kuei that Zhongxian had seen back at the mountain gate, and the aura that he exuded was incredibly powerful. Even though the will within the sculpture was incapable of materialization, unlike the Sage Kuei in the mountain gate, the sculpture seemed to harness some kind of spiritual power. With just a look, a cultivator would feel their thoughts suddenly becoming lucid. As expected of the first sanctum head of the sanctum of sages. To be able to instill a slight hint of deference within him just through a mere sculpture, there was no doubt that the strength that Sage Kuei wielded back when he was still alive far exceeded that of the deputy sanctum head standing before him. Zhongxian took a step forward and bowed deeply to pay his respect. Putting aside how powerful Sage Kuei was, just on the grounds that he had cultivated many generations of experts, allowing mankind to enjoy several dozen millenniums of relative peace and prosperity without fearing the invasion of the otherworldly demonic tribe, he was indeed worthy of respect. Not to mention, he had received the other party's heritage, the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld. However, it was a pity that despite the books that he had read over the past few days, he had not been able to find any that were related to optic arts. Otherwise, he surely would have perfected the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld and cultivated it well. "Master, I sense my upper body." While Zhongxian was deep in thought, vicious voice suddenly sounded in his head. "Where?" Part of the reason he wanted to enter the inner sanctum was to find Luo Ruoxin, but the other part was to help Vicious regain his strength. Hearing that his upper body had been found, Zhongxian's eyes could not help but light up in agitation. "It's inside this sculpture," Vicious replied. Chapter 14 Cultivation Technique 4s in the sculpture? Zhongxian was startled. He found this matter a little hard to believe. He would not have been too shocked if Vicious had told him that his upper body was placed within some ancestral hall or sealed deep underground, but to actually be hidden within Sage Kuei's sculpture. How could that be? Sage Kuei was the direct disciple of ancient sage Bo Shong, which meant that he was Kongsha's grandstudent. As the first sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages, his hatred for the otherworldly demonic tribe was so deep-seated that it could be said to be carved right into his bones. If he could, he would have unhesitatingly wiped the entire otherworldly demonic tribe off the face of the world. On the other hand, as one of the strongest experts of the otherworldly demonic tribe, Vicious' body was bound to harness extraordinary power even upon death. In order to prevent it from landing back in the hands of the otherworldly demonic tribe, the Master-Teacher Pavilion would surely seek to destroy it. Taking a step back, even if they were unable to destroy it, the least they could do was seal it off and hide it where no one would ever find it. But instead of doing that, It was actually placed in Sage Kuei's sculpture. Zhong Xian could hardly comprehend the rationale behind such a course of action. More importantly, despite storing vicious upper body within it, not only did the sculpture not harness the slightest killing intent, it was even exuding a particularly soothing and refined aura. How in the world was this done? Zhong Xian could not help asking, "Is it possible for you to have made a mistake?" It was not that he did not want to believe Vicious, but this matter was simply too hard for him to believe. The only reason he was able to hide Vicious' existence from others was through having the latter sealed in his Book of Heaven's Path. It should go without saying that Sage Kuei could not possibly have possessed the Library of Heaven's Path, so there was no way he would have been capable of suppressing Vicious' strength to the point where even his Eye of Insight was unable to sense it. If it was before fusing together with my head, it might still have been possible for me to make a mistake, but now, there's no way I am mistaken. Vicious replied affirmatively. Before fusing with his head, due to his incomplete memory, he would still have been uncertain about many things. But in his current state, he was 100% certain that his upper body was contained within the statue before them. Hearing how certain Vicious was, Zhong Xian frowned. "Let me take a look at it first." He activated his Eye of Insight and examined Sage Kuei's sculpture intently once more, and a moment later, he shook his head. Even the generations of Sanctum heads were unable to see through it. Considering how the realm of his Eye of Insight was lower than theirs, it was not too surprising that he would be unable to see anything. He stretched his hand out and touched the sleeves of the sculpture inconspicuously. A book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. A sculpture of Sage Kuei forged personally by Sage Kuei himself. Forged using celestial bluestone, it harnesses both ancient Sage Boshong's will and Vicious upper body. It is a vital keystone in stabilizing the space in the inner sanctum and regulating the spiritual energy in the air. The description and origin of the sculpture was jotted in detail in the book. "It's really inside." Zhong Xian's eyebrows scrunched up further. There was no way the Library of Heaven's Path could have made a mistake. Without a doubt, Vicious upper body was really in the sculpture. But still, to use the skeletal frame of an otherworldly demon expert to stabilize the inner sanctum and yet still prevent its killing intent from permeating the area. Just how did they manage to do it? Zhongshe. Seeing that Zhong Xian had fallen into a daze, Zhongshe called out loudly. "Pardon me, I was so overwhelmed by Sage Kuei's imposing disposition that I lost myself for a moment." Zhong Xian quickly clasped his fist and apologized. This matter concerned Vicious, so there was no way he could say it aloud before Zhongshe. Nevertheless, it felt like there was more to this issue. He would have to first make sense out of the matter first before making a move so as to prevent any unnecessary implications from occurring. "It's fine, I understand that feeling. I was also stunned for quite a while myself when I first saw Sage Kuei's sculpture. It really felt as if an ancestor was standing right before me, imparting valuable knowledge." Oblivious to Zhong Xian's true thoughts, Zhongshe let out a light chuckle. Zhong Xian nodded silently. At this point, a thought suddenly surfaced in his mind. If Vicious upper body has been sealed in Sage Kuei's sculpture and is suppressed by Sage Kuei's will, could this mean that it's unable to develop a new will? Each of Vicious body parts, be it the heart, finger, or head, had all birthed an individual consciousness of their own. However, under the constant suppression of Sage Kuei's will, there was a good possibility that the upper body might not have been able to successfully birth a consciousness. This would mean that his Vicious would have a much easier time assimilating it. Nevertheless, another major problem still stood in his way. In order for Vicious to assimilate his upper body, the sculpture would first have to be destroyed. However, that could very well cause the collapse of the entire inner sanctum. This was not an outcome that was acceptable to him. As the future sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages, how could he destroy such a precious legacy left behind by his ancestors just like that? "Zhongshe, may I know if there's anywhere like a cultivation technique library in the inner sanctum? My cultivation has recently reached half Grand Dominion realm, but I still haven't found a suitable Grand Dominion realm cultivation technique yet. The inner sanctum doesn't have any libraries, but it does have the cultivation technique forest, which contains the heritage left behind by the predecessors. Students who have just entered the inner sanctum are usually brought there, and as for what they receive, that is dependent on their luck. Zhonshi said. Cultivation technique forest. Indeed. The cultivation techniques that are qualified to be passed down in the inner sanctum are all of Saint High Tier or Saint Pinnacle quality at minimum, but as you know, each cultivator possesses a constitution unique to them. Cultivating a cultivation technique that complemented one's strength could lead one to the very top, whereas cultivating an incompatible cultivation technique could very well cause one's cultivation to go berserk. As such, a cultivator mustn't choose their cultivation technique just by the merit of the might it wield. Zhonshi explained. The cultivation technique forest is a place for cultivators to find out what cultivation techniques are suited for them and choose from them. All students in the inner sanctum get a chance to enter the cultivation technique forest to select among the cultivation techniques they are compatible with. Once they have made their choice, they will be unable to change it anymore. I see. Zhongxian nodded. Cultivation techniques were similar to occupations in the sense that they would be suited to some people but not others. As such, cultivators would have to assess their own aptitude and choose the path they wished to tread on. Of course, advice from seniors could prove to be useful, but ultimately, no one would be able to make the choice for them. This was also the reason Kongsha promoted the idea of teaching an individual based on their talents. There was no way a systematic lesson plan could possibly cater to all students, and this would lead to some of their talents going to waste. If you wish to give it a try, I can take you there, Zhonshi said. That would be deeply appreciated. Zhongxian nodded. Other than learning of the location of Vicious upper body, another important motive for him going to the inner sanctum was to raise his strength. Since Luo Ruoxin had been placed under house arrest by the Luo clan, there was no way she would be there. Rather than wasting his strength searching all around for her, it would be far more practical for him to raise his strength so that he would at least have the ability to protect her when the time came. Please follow me, Zhonshi said before leading the way forward. Not too long later, they arrived in a place filled with stone tablets. Looking at it from afar, it really resembled a graveyard. This is the cultivation technique forest. Every single tablet represents a certain cultivation technique. Drive your zhunqi and proceed through the forest slowly. Once you reach the end, the cultivation technique suited to you will jump out on its own, Zhonshi said. There's no need to feel tempted by other cultivation techniques in there. If they are unsuited for you, they are bound to inflict some grievous side effects on you, which will limit your future accomplishments. It simply isn't worth it. I understand. You mentioned that the suitable cultivation technique will jump out on its own? Zhongxian asked curiously. This was the first time he had heard of a cultivation technique jumping forward on its own, and he found the notion rather intriguing. Usually, he would be the one who would be actively seeking out cultivation technique manuals to compile a complete Heaven's Path divine art for him to cultivate, so he could not help but be a little curious as to just what kind of cultivation technique would be deemed suitable for him. That's right. The cultivation technique forest doesn't just contain cultivation technique manuals but the wills of the predecessors as well. They are able to sense your constitution and your current cultivation technique as you walk through the forest, and if you aren't able to meet their prerequisites, you won't even be able to interpret the content on the stone tablet. This is a mechanism put in place to prevent greedy students from biting off more than they can chew, Zhonshi said. Even though the young man before him was an 8-star master teacher, he was still much too young. So, Zhonshi could not resist warning him beforehand. In response to Zhonshi's nagging, Zhongxian nodded with a smile. This was the usual concerned nagging that teachers would direct at their students. Thinking back, he often nagged at his students in such a way as well. All right, I'll head in to take a look. Coming to understand what was with the cultivation technique forest, Zhongxian took a deep breath and walked in unhesitatingly. Chapter 14-15 St. Sixdan Pinnacle. There was only one road through the cultivation technique forest, and the both sides were completely filled with stone tablets. Taking a closer look, one could feel a few silhouettes moving on the surface of the tablets, seemingly practicing some sort of profound martial arts. The movements of these silhouettes were extremely slow, and for some reason, it seemed as if they were cloaked with a layer of thin mist. Even if one were to examine the tablet closely, it would still be hard to perceive their movements distinctly. However, Zhongxian didn't need to perceive their movements to learn what they were cultivating. All he really had to do was to direct a glance over at the stone tablets while muttering flaws. In his mind, illusory arcane dragon art, true inferno yang formula, Xuanmin ancestral impact, water undulation divine art. Books swiftly materialized in Zhongxian's mind. There weren't just Grand Dominion Realm cultivation technique manuals on the stone tablets, some were phantasmal space realm cultivation technique manuals as well. If one were to cultivate according to them, there was no doubt that one's cultivation would surely improve by leaps and bounds, granting one fighting prowess far exceeding that of their peers. Those who were qualified to enter the inner sanctum were all geniuses, and those who were qualified to leave behind these cultivation technique manuals were, even more so, geniuses amongst geniuses, individuals who had stood at the top of their generation. Zhongxian thought as he slowly proceeded forward. Through taking in the cultivation technique manuals into his library of Heaven's Path, he was able to swiftly convert it into his own knowledge, thus allowing him to analyze the pros and cons of each cultivation technique swiftly. While these cultivation techniques were far from matching up to top cultivation techniques like the heavenly art of dimension unravel, to most 8-star master teachers, they could still be considered as invaluable treasures. If any single one of them were to be taken out to the master teacher continent, it would surely induce a massive fight over it as countless cultivators vied to lay their hands on it. Of course, this could bring in the question of why the inner sanctum didn't open up the books to the public. The Sanctum of Sages did allow those whose main occupations were not master teacher to pick up a cultivation technique from the cultivation technique forest as well, so long as their main occupation had reached 8-star and they were qualified to enter the inner sanctum. Nevertheless, this didn't change the fact that it still wasn't accessible to most cultivators outside. The reason for that was that the stronger a cultivation technique was, the more demanding it was on one's talent. If one simply didn't have the aptitude for the cultivation technique but still forcefully attempted to cultivate it, not only would one's cultivation not improve as swiftly as expected, more importantly, it could potentially leave major traumas on one's body, resulting in unpredictable consequences. It was the same reason as why each occupation would only allow their members to view books corresponding to their current rank and below, and not those that were above their current rank. Without building up the necessary fundamental knowledge first, attempting to learn advanced content would, more likely than not, confuse one and possibly distort one's comprehension of the occupation. There was an inherent tendency within humans to overestimate their abilities, so in order to prevent such tragedies from occurring, there was a need to regulate the flow of information and knowledge so as to ensure that they would only reach appropriate hands. While others are spending numerous hours in here just to receive the recognition of one predecessor and obtaining his cultivation technique, I am already collecting nearly every single one of the cultivation techniques. Zhongxian thought gleefully. There was a diverse range of cultivation techniques here, and most of the stone tablets here were infused with the will of the creator of the cultivation technique too. Even if Zhongxue were here, he wouldn't be able to learn all of the cultivation techniques either. However, Zhongxian was different. Wherever his eye could reach, those stone tablets within his range of sight would be automatically compiled into a book within his library of Heaven's Path, and even their corresponding flaws would become apparent to him. As such, he was able to learn the cultivation techniques even without receiving the recognition from their respective creators. Slowly walking forward, Zhongxian relentlessly took in all of the cultivation techniques inscribed on the stone tablets around him. Over several dozen millenniums, the cultivation technique forest had accumulated more than 1,000 cultivation techniques, so it took quite a while before Zhongxian finally reached the end. Compile. Zhongxian willed. Countless books quickly gathered together within the library of Heaven's Path, fusing together to form the Grand Dominion Realm and Phantasmal Space Realm Heaven's Path Divine Art. Swiftly flipping open the two books before him to take a look, Zhongxian couldn't help but shake his head in slight disappointment. Just like what he had guessed, the Grand Dominion Realm Heaven's Path Divine Art had been fully perfected, devoid of any flaws, but the Phantasmal Space Realm cultivation technique still had quite a few mistakes here and there. Clearly, he hadn't collected sufficient Phantasmal Space Realm cultivation technique manuals yet. How could Zhongxue Not receive the recognition of even a single predecessor at all? Seeing that Zhongxian had walked out of the cultivation technique forest without inducing the slightest bit of response from the stone tablets, Zhongxue frowned in bewilderment. Be it in terms of talent or fighting prowess, the young man before him had already reached an astounding level. Why would he receive no recognition from the predecessors of the cultivation technique forest at all? I haven't been driving my cultivation technique, Zhongxian replied with a smile. His goal was just to collect the cultivation technique manuals in the cultivation technique forest, so he chose not to drive his cultivation technique. As a result of that, he hadn't received the recognition of any of the predecessors either. Besides, the cultivation technique he practiced was the Heaven's Path divine art. Which predecessor's eyesight would be so bad as to dare to recognize him? You have to drive your cultivation technique while walking through the cultivation technique forest in order to receive the recognition of the predecessors so that you can obtain their secret manuals. To simply walk through it just like that. You won't be able to obtain anything like that. Zhongxue exclaimed anxiously. It's fine, I have already obtained what I wanted. May I ask if there's any silent chamber here where I can cultivate in? I would like to digest what I have just learned. I think I might be able to make a breakthrough in my cultivation. Knowing that it would be difficult for him to explain the matter to Zhongxue in a way that was acceptable to the latter, Zhongxian didn't bother delving too deeply into the matter either. There's a silent chamber right there. A spiritual gathering formation has been inscribed in it. It can help you gather the surrounding spiritual energy. Zhongxue said as he pointed toward a specific direction. Since the cultivation technique forest was a place for cultivators to pick up a cultivation technique and learn, the inner sanctum had also provided some silent chambers nearby for cultivators who suddenly had a sudden stroke of inspiration to sit down and ponder over it. Zhongxian directed a nod at Zhongxue before walking over to the silent chamber. He pushed on its entrance lightly and walked in. Perhaps it was due to the presence of the spirit gathering formation. The spiritual energy was even more concentrated than outside. At the same time, the silent chamber seemed to be made of some kind of unique material that completely isolated the space within from the external world, keeping all noises and even spiritual perception at bay, thus ensuring absolute silence to the cultivator inside. Nevertheless, Zhongxian still swiftly took a look around the chamber, and only after ensuring that it was absolutely safe did he finally heave a sigh of relief. He flicked his wrist and took out the pinnacle spirit stones which Sun Qiong and Zhong Chun had given to him. As his cultivation rose, the spiritual energy requirement of his Heaven's Path divine art had been steadily increasing too. Nevertheless, with 10 pinnacle spirit stones on hand, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to push for a breakthrough straight for Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle. Grabbing the spirit stones tightly in his hand, he quickly went through the Grand Dominion Realm Heaven's Path divine art once more as he conditioned his physical condition to his peak before finally starting his cultivation. Gu. As if a lifted dam, spiritual energy swiftly gushed through the meridians in his body, and they were swiftly converted into Heaven's Path Shunqi, nourishing his entire body. Catcher. It didn't take too long for him to bash through his half-Grand Dominion Realm bottleneck, and his 1-meter radius dominion immediately began expanding, till the point that it covered a radius of 10 meters around him. Not only so, his dominion was clearly much denser and heavier than that of ordinary Grand Dominion realm cultivators. Those who had unfortunately fallen into his dominion would be completely frozen on the spot as if they had been shackled by heavy chains. Even though its radius was only at 10 meters, in terms of prowess, it was on par with even Grand Dominion realm pinnacle experts. Continue. Expecting at least this much from the Heaven's Path divine art, Zhongxian wasn't surprised in the least. With a slight smile, he continued his cultivation. Under the drive of his Zhunqi, his cultivation swiftly rose, becoming stronger and stronger. Grand Dominion Realm Primary Stage. Grand Dominion Realm Intermediate Stage. Grand Dominion Realm Advanced Stage. Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle. In just 4 hours, his cultivation had already reached Saint 6 Dan Pinnacle, just a step away from achieving a breakthrough to Saint 7 Dan Phantasmal Space Realm. With the break though in his cultivation, his dominion had grown larger enough to cover a radius of 50 meters, more than twofold larger than that of the 20 meters radius of an average Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle cultivator. Not only so, He also realized that the dominion he created was an isolated space from the rest of the world. Any external spiritual perception that attempted to delve into his dominion would be completely severed, as if falling into a folded space. From this phenomenon in itself, he could tell that his dominion was already nowhere weaker than that of Saint Seven Dan cultivators. With my current strength, I should be able to subdue even Zhong Chun easily, Zhong Xian thought with a smile. With his cultivation reaching Grand Dominion Realm pinnacle, the phantasmal space realm Zhong Chun was no longer a match for him anymore. He didn't have to take a passive stance anymore. But again, Zhong Chun probably hadn't recovered from being pummeled by his clone yet, and at the same time, Luo Shenqing was also eyeing him tightly. Even if he didn't make a move, Zhong Chun probably didn't have any good days ahead of him anymore. The spiritual energy harnessed within Pinnacle Spirit Stones sure is immense. It took me only 8 of them to up my cultivation by an entire realm. It was no wonder why Luo Shenqing, Zhong Chun, and the others were able to achieve breakthroughs so quickly, reaching such high cultivation realms at their young age. With such resources to support their growth, it would be hard for them not to grow so swiftly. While Zhong Xian was busy raising his cultivation, Zhonshi was pacing outside the silent chamber with a tight knit between his eyebrows. Whenever other students entered the cultivation technique forest, they would drive their cultivation techniques as powerfully as they could, hoping to gain the recognition of as many predecessors as possible. Yet, that fellow simply took a walk through it before heading straight for the silent chamber. Could it be that none of the cultivation techniques in the cultivation technique forest caught his interest? But that shouldn't be. Those are all Saint High Tier and Saint Pinnacle cultivation techniques. It's more likely that he had driven his cultivation technique but failed to obtain the recognition of any of the predecessors. With such doubts in mind, Zhonshi turned his sights to the stone tablets by the side. With just a single look, he suddenly froze on the spot. The silhouette moving on the stone tablet had all stopped displaying their cultivation techniques. As if they were faced with something deeply frightening, they were shivering at the corner of the stone tablet, not daring to move or make any noise at all. Suppression of cultivation technique, inborn deference of the heart. This is the cultivation technique of an ancient sage. Could it be that Zhongshi is the direct disciple of an ancient sage? Zhonshi narrowed his eyes in astonishment as he clenched his fists tightly together. Chapter 14:16 Accompany me to the Zhong clan. Most of the cultivation techniques in the cultivation technique forest originated from Sage Kuei and the others' lineages, so if an ancient sage-level cultivation technique were to appear, the wills in the stone tablets would swiftly be suppressed. For all of these wills to suddenly become like that after Zhong Xian passed through the cultivation technique forest, it could not be that the cultivation technique that he practiced had already reached such a level, could it? If that was the case, it would be understandable why he was not interested in any other the techniques in the cultivation technique forest. Then, the reason he still chose to enter it would be to source some inspiration from them. Has Yangshi already reached such a realm? Zhonshi pondered in awe. Zhong Xian was Yangshi's student, so the fact that he was able to learn a cultivation technique of such a tier should mean that Yangshi had reached such a realm himself. Otherwise, it would mean that they had obtained the heritage of a true ancient sage. Regardless of which one it was, this was a matter that he could not afford to speak of lightly. This matter mustn't be leaked, Zhonshi thought warily. If his deduction was true, he would have to warn Zhong Xian not to carelessly display his cultivation technique in public, or else once the otherworldly demonic tribe or some other greedy cultivators noticed it, his life could very well be danger. Even though he had already reached Saint 9 Dan in terms of his cultivation, the truth was that he was still only a half 9-star master teacher. A true 9-star master teacher was an existence that had already transcended the limits of the saint realm. Rumor had it that those who had reached that level would have their bodies tempered by celestial flames, thus cleansing their physical body and soul once more and refining them to a higher level of existence. With that, they would enjoy a massive increase in their lifespan. At such a level of cultivation, they would be immune to poison. Even if they had been afflicted with some kind of deadly poison in the past, the celestial flames would also torch it clean, leaving no trace of it behind. It was for this reason that he had been trying his hardest to push for a breakthrough over the years, but unfortunately, Despite his hard work, he had not been able to make a breakthrough to Saint 9 Dan intermediate stage. At his cultivation realm, there was a huge rift even between each cultivation stage within a realm. Each breakthrough would require a massive accumulation in one's cultivation before one could attempt to make the leap forward. Gia. Just as Jean Shi was still deep in thought, the door to the chamber suddenly creaked open, and a figure walked out. Directing a glance over, Jean Shi's eyes immediately widened into full circles, and he nearly collapsed on the spot. Zhongshu, why your cultivation? It was only 4 hours ago that the other party had entered the silent chamber, so why would his cultivation suddenly leap from half-Grand Dominion realm to Grand Dominion realm pinnacle? That was practically equivalent to an entire realm. Was that not a little too fast? Noting Jean Shi's expression, Zhongxian explained, I had a sudden stroke of inspiration, so I was able to make a swift breakthrough. However, I think my cultivation will slow down in the future. With sufficient spiritual energy, the Heaven's Path divine art allowed him to advance his cultivation swiftly. However, as his cultivation grew stronger and stronger, the speed at which he could raise his cultivation was noticeably decreasing, so in a sense, his words could not be considered lies. It took a while for Jean Shi to recover from his shock, and he could not help but give calm advice. It's good that you are able to advance your cultivation so quickly, but you mustn't rush things too much. If your cultivation increases too quickly, it could lead to your zhenqi becoming less compact and the foundation of your cultivation becoming unstable. That would lead to a great deal of trouble in the future. In truth, it was not too difficult for a cultivator to raise their cultivation swiftly. Consumption of pills, cultivation impartation, and the awakening of unique bloodlines and unique constitutions, any of those would allow one's cultivation to reach unprecedented heights within a very short period of time. However, if one failed to reinforce one's cultivation firmly before making a breakthrough, it would lead to the foundation of one's cultivation becoming shaky, thus making it extremely difficult for one to push for a breakthrough in the future. In a sense, this was similar to building a castle. If even the bottom layer was shaky and unstable, there would be a limit to how high it could rise in the future. For this reason, even those who possessed unique bloodlines and constitutions would have to pause for a moment after accomplishing some breakthroughs to reinforce their cultivation firmly before pressing on. I know. I have reinforced my half-Grand Dominion cultivation for roughly a day now, and it's already about time for me to make a breakthrough. Zhongxian nodded earnestly in agreement. A day. Jean Shi's cheeks twitched, and he staggered backward weakly, nearly falling to the ground from shock. He could not help but ask, how long have you reinforced your Saint 5 Dan cultivation? Even for top-notch geniuses, it would take several months before they were able to fully reinforce their half-Grand Dominion realm cultivation, and yet, the young man was actually saying that one day was enough. More importantly, he said such words with such a natural expression, as if saying this was to be expected. Do you really need to be so traumatizing? After a moment of pondering, Zhongxian replied in a regretful tone, Saint 5 Dan? I made my breakthrough to the leaving aperture realm the day that I enrolled in the Sanctum of Sages, but due to being plagued with work during that period of time, it ended up taking me roughly 20 days before I was able to make a breakthrough to half-Grand Dominion realm. 20 days. Jean Shi's body began shaking intensely. Staring at Zhongxian intently, he asked, then, how long has it been since you started cultivating? Since I started cultivating? Not expecting such a question, Zhongxian did a quick calculation before replying, roughly 13 months I think, a little more than a year. If he had not transcended over to the Qianxian kingdom but to the Sanctum of Sages, he would have been able to reach his current level of cultivation within just a month. That was a hulking 13-fold difference in time. Just the thought of it was enough to leave him feeling deeply suffocated on the inside. Jean Shi suddenly did not want to speak to the young man before him anymore. To rise from fighter realm all the way to Saint 6 Dan pinnacle within just 13 months, that was a speed that was even faster than the little princess of the Luo clan. And yet, that fellow's expression seemed to be saying that he was discontented with the speed that he was cultivating at. Is it possible for anyone to get even more spoiled than that? Oblivious to the thoughts running through Jean Shi's mind, Zhongxian asked, Sanctum head Jean, do you have any Saint 7 Dan cultivation technique manuals? Can I borrow them for a look? Since his cultivation had already reached Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle, he needed to look around for phantasmal space realm cultivation technique manuals. If he could perfect the Saint Seven Dan Heaven's Path Divine Art, he just might be able to use the last 2 Pinnacle Spirit Stones to push for another breakthrough. In any case, the higher his cultivation was, the safer he would be. Saint Seven Dan Cultivation Technique Manuals? I'm afraid that I don't have any of those with me at the moment. If you really need them, you can head over to the Corridor of Puppets. You'll be given a chance to choose from a collection of secret manuals if you clear the trial there, Zhonxia replied. A Saint 9 Dan cultivator like him would have no use for Saint 7 Dan cultivation technique manuals, so naturally, he would not carry them with him. I see. Thank you for your suggestion. Zhong Xian nodded. He had been to the Corridor of Puppets twice, and considering the devastating destruction that he had caused over there, he felt really embarrassed to head there once more. However, since the other party did not have any Saint 7 Dan cultivation technique manuals with him, it would not be good for him to keep asking. Just as Zhong Xian was about to ask another question, Zhonxia's eyebrows suddenly shot up. He flicked his wrist, and a communication jade token appeared in his palm. Taking a glance at the communication jade token, he frowned in confusion. Why would he be contacting me? Zhonxia tapped his finger on the communication jade token, and the confusion on his face deepened. Wait, he isn't looking for me but, you? Someone is looking for me? Zhong Xian was startled. Who is it? Jian Qinsheng, Zhonxia replied. Jian Qinsheng is looking for me? Zhong Xian frowned. Jian Qinsheng was the descendant of the third sanctum head, Jian Liushui, and Zhong Xian had learned the flowing water swordsmanship from him. After unintentionally pummeling the Jian Qinsheng the previous time around, he had not heard any news from the other party. Why would the other party suddenly be looking for him at this moment, not to mention, even contacting Zhonxia to get to him? Let's head out. He's waiting for you outside, Zhonxia said. All right. Zhong Xian did not know why Jian Qinsheng was looking for him, but it was thanks to the latter allowing him to browse through his collection of sword manuals that he had achieved his current mastery of swordsmanship. He felt deeply grateful to the other party's generosity, so naturally, he would not turn down a meeting with the other party. The two of them quickly left the inner sanctum, and as soon they stepped out of the door, they saw Jian Qinsheng standing in a gazebo just by the side of the lake. Upon seeing the both of them, Jian Qinsheng's eyes lit up, and he quickly walked up to them. Zhonxia, Zhonxia. Jian Qinsheng clasped his fist and greeted. After trading some pleasantries, Zhong Xian got straight to the topic at hand. May I know the reason behind your visit? This. Actually, I do have something that I need to trouble you on. Jian Qinsheng spoke up with slight awkwardness in his tone. Zhonxia, are you willing to accompany me to the Zhong clan? Chapter 1417 The Zhong clan's clan assembly. You want me to accompany you to the Zhong clan? Which Zhong clan? Zhong Xian was taken aback. Is there a second Zhong clan? It goes without saying that I'm referring to the number 1 sage clan in the world. Jian Qinsheng harumphed. I'm about to head there soon, and I hope that Zhonxia can accompany me there. Me? Zhong Xian was unable to keep up with the situation. Pardon me, but why would you need me to head there with you? It was not like he was from the Zhong clan, so there was no point in him heading there, right? Besides, it was just a moments ago that he had given Zhong Chun a good pummeling, and to run to the enemy's home base right after. He still had many good years ahead of him, and he did not want to die a premature death just yet. Well, it's like this. Jian Qinsheng's face flushed slightly red before he started speaking. In truth, I have some history with the Xingmeng sword saint of the Zhong clan, and I once vowed that I would groom a successor who would surpass his. You should have met my students. None of them are really strong enough to shoulder this burden, so I can only hope for Zhonxia to make a move in my stead. If he had not really been cornered to this point, he never would have troubled the other party. As fellow sword masters, he and the Xingmeng sword saint had been rivals in the Sanctum of Sages, and they had competed with one another frequently. Eventually, he had become an elder of the Sanctum of Sages, whereas the latter had returned to his clan to serve as the deputy clan head. In view of their identities, they could not compete like they did back then anymore, so they agreed on competing through their students instead. And in the previous few battles, his students had lost tragically. The talent and bloodline of those in the Zhong clan was simply too powerful. Even their aptitude toward swordsmanship was also far stronger than that of his students. Initially, he had given up hope on this matter, but upon meeting Zhong Xian, one of the few aspiring, young swordmasters outside of the Zhong clan, he had suddenly seen a ray of hope. Unwilling to simply accept his loss just like that, he had chosen to buck up the courage to ask Zhong Xian this favor. Compared to the young man before him, all of his students were like frogs in a well. In fact, in terms of swordsmanship mastery, even he was not a match for the young man. What you mean is that you want me to challenge the Xingmeng Sword Saint in the capacity as the successor to your swordsmanship? Zhong Xian finally understood what was going on. He had seen Zhen Qinsheng's students, and indeed, it would be rather embarrassing to bring them out in public. Even the strongest senior seer had been utterly defeated by him with just a strand of hair, completely unable to retaliate. That's not it. You wouldn't be able to stand against the Xingmeng Sword Saint even with your current proficiency in swordsmanship. What I hope for you to do is to challenge his successor, Zhen Qinsheng said awkwardly. Considering how the other party had not learned the slightest thing about swordsmanship from him, on the contrary, the other party even provided him valuable pointers to bringing his swordsmanship to another higher level, it was indeed a little embarrassing for him to ask the other party to act as his successor. Taken off guard by the abrupt request, Zhong Xian found himself at a loss. Even though he was extremely displeased with how the Zhong clan was treating Luo Ruoxin and wanted to teach them a lesson, he would still rather challenge them in his capacity as Luo Ruoxin's boyfriend than as Zhen Qinsheng's successor. Instead of turning down Zhen Qinsheng's request immediately, Zhong Xian frowned. Elder Zhen, if you wish to turn the tables on the Xingmeng Sword Saint, you should be able to win fair and square soon enough if you use the modified version of the flowing water swordsmanship that I have given you to groom your successor. It shouldn't take too long for the effects to show, so there shouldn't be any need for you to be in such a rush, right? Out of guilt for destroying Zhen Qinsheng's residence and unintentionally severely injuring the elder, he had altered the flowing water swordsmanship and handed the manual over to Shui Qianrou. Given Shui Qianrou's aptitude toward swordsmanship, as long as she cultivated the modified manual strictly, there should be a massive leap in her fighting prowess very soon. Considering how she was Zhen Qinsheng's direct disciple, the honor and glory that he would derive from the victory should be far greater. After all, even though it had only been less than a month since Zhong Xian had come to the Sanctum of Sages, considering the various commotions surrounding him and his current identity as Yangshi's student, it was likely that the Xingmeng Sword Saint would swiftly realize that he was not Zhen Qinsheng's student. Once that happened, it would render Zhen Qinsheng's efforts meaningless. The sword art that you have imparted to us is truly formidable, such that even I have benefited greatly from its ingenuity. If Shui Qianrou studies it diligently, she should be able to improve swiftly within a short period of time. However, I am indeed in a rush. The Zhong clan's clan assembly is just about to start, and if I were to miss this one, I don't know how much longer I'll have to wait for the next opportunity, Zhen Qinsheng said. Clan assembly? Zhong Xian was bewildered. What does the Zhong clan's clan assembly have anything to do with the challenge between you and the Xingmeng Sword Saint? This is a private grudge between you and the Xingmeng Sword Saint, right? Is there really a need for you to confront the other party during their clan assembly? Or does this mean to say that you intend to wreak havoc in the Zhong clan? But if the Zhong clan could be bullied so easily, there is no way it would have been able to survive so long and retain its position as the #1 sage clan on the Master-Teacher continent. All of the top geniuses of the Zhong clan would be returning to attend the clan assembly, so we'll be able to challenge their strongest sword practitioners if we challenge them at this event. Only when their best sword practitioners have been defeated can this be considered a victory for me, Zhen Qinsheng explained. And most importantly of all, if my successor can defeat all of the sword practitioners of the Zhong clan during such an occasion, I will be able to embarrass the Xingmeng Sword Saint and force him to acknowledge his loss to me. Zhong Xian was rendered completely speechless. However, there was indeed some sense into what Zhen Qinsheng was saying. If he wanted a good platform to defeat the Xingmeng Sword Saint once and for all, the Zhong clan's clan assembly was definitely a good opportunity to do so. If he could triumph over the Xingmeng Sword Saint before the entire Zhong clan, he would be able to cleanse all of the humiliation that he had suffered thus far. Of course, if he lost in such a setting, his reputation would be swept into the gutters. That's equivalent to putting your reputation and honor on the line. The stakes are simply too high. I fear that I'm unworthy of your confidence. Zhong Xian pondered for a while, but eventually, he still decided to turn down the offer. As much as he wanted to get back at the Zhong clan, he did not dare gamble with Jian Qinsheng's reputation and honor. While everything would be great and wonderful if he won, he could not bear to imagine the consequences if he lost. As confident as Zhong Xian was in his strength, the implications behind this matter was simply too big. As an outsider to the grudge, he was unwilling to shoulder such a heavy responsibility. Hearing Zhong Xian's rejection, a bitter smile surfaced on Jian Qinsheng's face. It seems like my request is really a little too abrupt. It was indeed a little inappropriate of me to attempt to involve you in my private affair, and I apologize for that. He had only met Zhong Xian once, and he had not imparted anything to the young man at all. On the contrary, it was the young man who had corrected the flaws in his cultivation, so in that sense, the young man could even be said to be his benefactor. And instead of repaying the kindness of his benefactor, he had made such an inappropriate request to the other party. It was understandable why the young man would turn down his request. Elder Jian, you needn't feel disheartened. If there's still some time, I can offer some pointers to Shui Qianrou's swordsmanship, and hopefully, she will be able to bring you glory during the clan assembly. Zhong Xian offered with a smile. I'm afraid that there's no time for that anymore. The Zhong clan's clan assembly will be held a month from now, and I'll have to start making my way over now in order to make it in time. Jian Qinsheng shook his head. Considering how the young man before him had been able to see through his flaws and offer pointers to correct them, there was no doubt that Shui Qianrou's fighting prowess would improve immensely under his guidance. However, it was a pity that time did not allow it. The Zhong clan's clan assembly will be held a month from now? Zhong Xian was slightly intrigued. Shouldn't the clan assembly be usually held during festive seasons and the like? Why now? He seemed to recall Zhong Zhouxiao saying that the clan assembly would be held during the start of the new year, and it would only be the 11th month a month later. Did they bring their clan assembly forward? I heard that some unexpected situations occurred. It seems like the Zhong clan decided to hold their clan assembly earlier to discuss the bringing forward of the matrimony with the Luo clan. Jian Qinsheng paused for a moment before adding, however, that's just speculation on my part. The Zhong clan intends to bring forward the matrimony with the Luo clan? Zhong Xian widened his eyes in astonishment. Indeed. According to the rumors, it seems like the little princess of the Luo clan has someone she likes, and that has provoked the ire of the Zhong clan. Thus, they decided to bring forward the matrimony from the 3rd month of the next year to the start of the year so as to prevent any unexpected situations from occurring. Jian Qinsheng told Zhong Xian everything that he knew about the matter. Start of the year. A bolt of lightning flashed across Zhong Xian's mind as his clenched fists trembled intensely in agitation. Chapter 14:18 Zhong Zhouxiao acknowledges a teacher if it was the 3rd month of the next year, considering how it was only the start of the 10th month at the moment, he would still have had 5 months to prepare. Given how swiftly his cultivation was growing, it would not have been too difficult for him to become the sanctum head of the sanctum of sages by then. However, if it was the start of the next year, he would only have 2 months to prepare. Time would simply be too tight for him. It was just a moment ago that he had heard that the Luo clan had grounded Luo Ruoxin, and the next instant, the Zhong clan had already brought their clan assembly forward. Were they really in such a rush to marry Luo Ruoxin? Those shameless bastards. Zhong Xian's face turned livid, and he felt raging fury burning in his chest, threatening to blow up at any moment. Ever since his transcension over to this world, other than the incident where Lu Chong was nearly killed while trying to save him, he had never been so angry before. To think that the #1 sage clan of the master-teacher continent would completely disregard a young lady's feelings and forcefully push her into a marriage. How were they any different from petty bandits? He had not wanted to blow things up out of proportion, but since they were this shameless, there was no need for him to hold back. Zhongsha. Noticing the huge fluctuations in Zhongxian's emotions, Jian Qinsheng and Zhonshe were startled. 8-star master teachers possessed a transcendental state of mind, and they would be able to remain perfectly composed even as mountains collapsed right before their eyes. Yet, why would the young man get so agitated all of a sudden? Realizing that he had accidentally allowed his emotions to flow through, Zhongxian quickly reined in his rage and replied, "I'm fine." Then, he turned to Jian Qinsheng and said, "Elder Jian, when are you heading off to the Zhong clan?" Ah! Not expecting the young man to ask such a question, Jian Qinsheng was dazed for a brief moment before he quickly replied, "I have already prepared an aerial saint beast, and I'm intending to set off right after this." "Very well. I'll accompany you to the Zhong clan," Zhongxian said affirmatively. Hearing those words, Jian Qinsheng traded glances with Zhonshe. The situation was changing so quickly that he found himself being unable to keep up with it. It was just a moment ago that the young man had said that he was unworthy of his confidence, clearly expressing his reluctance to be involved in this mess. Yet, in the blink of an eye, he had suddenly agreed to follow him to the Zhong clan. After some careful thought, I feel that there's a dire need to teach the Zhong clan a lesson and bring our sanctum of sages flowing water swordsmanship the glory that it deserves. Zhongxian exclaimed with a grand wave of his hand. "Aren't you intending to hold a clan assembly to discuss the matter of marrying Luo Ruoxin at the start of next year? Very well. I shall make sure to wreak havoc such that you won't even have time on your hands to broach that subject during the clan assembly." Jian Qinsheng was deeply moved by Zhongxian's words. Bliss had simply come too quickly to him. He had never thought that Zhongxian would suddenly accept his proposal just like that. Just that, he was competing with the Xingmeng sword saint to settle a private grudge between the two of them. What did this have to do with the flowing water swordsmanship of the Sanctum of Sages? Despite the doubts in his mind, Jian Qinsheng was still delighted to have Zhongxian on board with him. The young man before him had comprehended two different sword quintessences, so it was likely that his aptitude in swordsmanship far exceeded even that of the Xingmeng sword saints. With the young man making a move, he should be able to crush the Zhong clan's morale and cleanse the shame that he had been put through over the years. It's truly wonderful that Zhongshe is willing to accompany me to the Zhong clan. When would be a convenient time for you to set off? Jian Qinsheng asked. I'll have to make some preparations beforehand, so let's set off tonight. Zhongxian replied. Luo Shenqing had said that he had some business for him, and this could very well concern Luo Ruoxin. Thus, he felt that he should first listen to what Luo Shenqing had to say before heading off to the Zhong clan. Hearing those words, Jian Qinsheng heaved a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Very well. I'll be waiting for you in my residence, so come and find me there once you are ready." Zhongxian nodded in response before turning to clasp his fist toward Zhonshe. Sanctum head Zhon, I'll be taking my leave now. Yuan, knowing that Zhongxian's mind was already made up, Zhonshe did not bother to dissuade the young man out of this. Instead, he said, if the Zhong clan makes things difficult for you, let me know. Rest assured that the Sanctum of Sages will definitely stand up for you. Zhongxian nodded with a smile in response to those words. He had half expected Zhonshe to try and stop him, but looking at it once more now, how could the deputy sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages possibly be a cowardly person who was afraid of trouble? As one of the two major subordinate powers of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, if the Sanctum of Sages were to cower in fear before a mere Zhong clan, it really would not be worthy of the standing and prestige that the world had accorded it. Who? Having made up his mind, Zhongxian quickly bade farewell and left. Not too long later, he arrived at his residence. As soon as he landed on the ground, he was immediately welcomed by Sun Qiong. Young master, Zhong Zhouxiao is here. He has been waiting for you for some time now. Zhouxiao? I'll go and take a look. Frowning, Zhongxian quickly made his way over to the main hall. Entering the main hall, he saw Zhong Zhouxiao pacing around the room with an anxious look on his face. The latter visibly heaved a sigh of relief upon noticing him. He hurriedly walked up to him and clasped his fist. Zhongshe, is this regarding your clan assembly? Zhongxian asked. How did you know? Zhong Zhouxiao was startled. Let's put that aside for now. Are you here for that? Zhongxian asked. That's right. I'm here to thank you for the guidance that you have offered over the past few months. There's no way I would have ever been qualified to attend such a major event without your help. To tell you the truth, I'm here to bid you farewell. My clan has already sent a saint beast over, and it's currently waiting outside for me. Most likely, I won't return to the Sanctum of Sages until next year, Zhong Zhouxiao said. As a member of the Side family, he should not have been qualified to attend such a major event of the Zhong clan, but under Zhong Xian's guidance, he had successfully enrolled into the Sanctum of Sages as a student. That was the only reason that he had been invited to the clan assembly too. As tight as his schedule was, he still felt compelled to pay one last visit to Zhong Xian to express his gratitude prior to leaving. After all, none of this would have happened without the latter's help. You didn't mention this the last time we met. Why are you leaving for your clan assembly all of a sudden? Zhong Xian asked. Despite his composed exterior, his heart was actually beating in trepidation. He was hoping that he would not receive the answer that he expected. To be honest with you, I'm not too sure either. I only received the notice to set off today. Those of the younger generation who are invited to the clan assembly must return to the clan within a month's time. I'm not too clear about the details, but it seems like they will be conducting some kind of selections. Zhongshe, you also know that I don't possess much standing in the Zhong clan. It's already a huge blessing for me to even be invited into the clan assembly. There's no way that they would inform of something as confidential as that, Zhong Zhouxiao said awkwardly. It was not that he wanted to hide anything from Zhong Xian, but he was truly ignorant of the matter. All right, I understand. Zhong Xian waved his hand. Take care of yourself. Most likely, I will be heading to the Zhong clan too, so if you find out anything, do make sure to inform me. Zhongshe, you're going to attend the clan assembly, too? Zhong Zhouxiao was startled. Yuan, I'll be heading there to settle some affairs, Zhong Xian said. This matter could very well draw the hostility of the Zhong clan, but don't worry, I won't put you in a difficult position. Fearing that the other party would think that he was asking him to spy for him, Zhong Xian swiftly reassured the other party to allay his fears. Zhongshe, please don't say such words. It's only due to your guidance that I am what I am today. Otherwise, I could very well still be the self-assuming young man that I was back in Qingyuan City, Zhong Zhouxiao exclaimed in agitation. These were his earnest feelings. If not for the young man before him generously imparting invaluable knowledge to him, putting aside enrolling into the Sanctum of Sages, he would not have been able to clear Zhao Xingmo's selections at all. It was precisely due to this that he was filled with veneration for the young man before him. You're too kind. As friends, it's only right for us to help one another, Zhong Xian said. I would love to be friends with Zhongshe, but I know that I'm not good enough for that. Be it in terms of talent, knowledge, or eye of discernment, I am far beneath you. In fact, Zhongshe, I hope that you can take me in as your student. Zhong Zhouxiao stepped forward and lowered his head deeply. This was something that he had been thinking about since a very long time ago. Having received the other party's pointers in his swordsmanship and cultivation, the other party could already be considered half a teacher to him. At this moment, since he was already on the verge of leaving, he could not hold this urge of his back anymore. You want me to take you in as my student? Not expecting to hear such words from Zhong Zhouxiao, Zhong Xian widened his eyes slightly in astonishment. Chapter 14-19 Help me kill a man. While he might have offered a fair number of pointers to Zhong Zhouxiao, he had viewed the latter as a friend rather than a student all along. Who would have thought that the incomparably prideful genius would actually want to become his student instead? That's right, Zhong Zhouxiao replied with a resolute gaze. The others might not know much about the young man before him, but having been with the latter ever since his time in the Qingyuan Empire, he still knew a fair bit about him. For one, he knew that, of the young man's students, Zheng Yang had become the progeny of combat of the Combat Master Hall, Zhao Yue had become the young court chief of the Glacier Plain Court, and Yuan Dao was the most talented offspring and possibly the next clan head of the Yuan clan. Those were the only 3 students of the young man that he knew about, but just the 3 of them were already more than enough to shake the master-teacher continent at its core. And it was one thing for his students to be formidable, but more than that, The young man himself was the only man to become a celestial master teacher in the past several dozen millenniums after Kongsha. Not to mention, he was the direct disciple of the most esteemed Grand Elder of the Master Teacher Pavilion. There was no doubt that the young man possessed unimaginable potential within him. If he could become the young man's student, he would be able to soar into the boundless sky along with him instead of remaining as a nobody in his clan. Zhongxian pondered for a moment before saying, "I don't go easy on my students." "Are you certain that you want me to be your teacher?" "Yes, I am certain," Zhong Zhouxiao replied. "Very well. From today onward, you shall be my student." Zhongxian nodded. Even though Zhong Zhouxiao's talent and bloodline were not on par with Zhong Chun, Zhong Feng, and the others, the greatest merit that he had over the rest of them was that he was incredibly tenacious. Under his guidance, the other party would surely be able to reach great heights. However, he was only going to take in Zhong Zhouxiao as his student and not his direct disciple. With so many uncertainties surrounding his life at the moment, he was not ready to commit to accepting another direct disciple. "Thank you, teacher." A hint of slight disappointment flashed across Zhong Zhouxiao's eyes when he heard Zhongxian address him as his student rather than his direct disciple. Nevertheless, he quickly kneeled onto the ground and kowtowed. Being the student of a celestial master teacher was a great honor as well. To him, this meant much more than becoming a core member of the Zhong clan. "I have a cultivation technique here. I want you to practice it well and reach Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle before we reach the Zhong clan." With a tap of his finger, Zhongxian transferred a cultivation technique into Zhong Zhouxiao's mind. Currently, Zhong Zhouxiao was only at the leaving aperture realm, a huge way off from reaching the Grand Dominion realm. While Zhongxian had offered the other party pointers in the past, those pointers were intended to resolve the flaws in his cultivation rather than to enhance it. After all, Zhong Zhouxiao was not part of his lineage, so he was not obliged to impart anything to the other party. But now that he had imparted a simplified version of the Heaven's Path divine art to the other party, as long as he had ample resources, it would not be too difficult for him to push for a breakthrough of 2 cultivation realms within a month. In a sense, this could be considered a trial for Zhong Zhouxiao as well. If the other party could not even achieve this much, he would not be worthy of being his student. Hearing that he had to reach Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle within a single month, Zhong Zhouxiao's cheeks visibly twitched. However, he swiftly gritted his teeth and replied solemnly, "Teacher, I won't let you down." The higher one's cultivation realm was, the more difficult it was to raise one's cultivation realm. Even for the geniuses of the Sanctum of Sages, it would take several months of cultivation for them to push for just a breakthrough in their cultivation stage. Nevertheless, since his teacher had already given him the instruction, he would just have to accomplish it regardless of the cost. Boom. Seeing the resolve in Zhong Zhouxiao's eyes, Zhongxian nodded in satisfaction. Just as he was about to issue a few more instructions, his mind suddenly jolted. A book had floated out from the shelves in the Library of Heaven's Path, and it slowly flipped open, revealing a golden gleam within it. A golden page. It had been so long since Zhongxian had taken in any students that he had nearly forgot that the Library of Heaven's Path still had such a function. The power harnessed within each formed golden page was immense. Back then, he had planted one within Wei Ruyan in order to ensure her safety in the poison hall, and eventually, it had actually succeeded in killing one of the 4 eminences with ease. With the golden page as a trump card, there was no longer anything for him to fear in the Zhong clan. "Chemph, Zhong clan, just you wait. This time, I won't rest until my reputation as the god of destruction is imprinted deeply into every single one of your mind." Zhongxian's clenched fists trembled in agitation as a vicious glint flashed across his eyes. Not too long after Zhong Zhouxiao left, Luo Shenqing came over. Upon seeing that Zhongxian was in his residence, Luo Shenqing heaved a sigh of relief. Using a particularly complex set of hand seals, he sealed the surrounding space tightly before walking up to Zhongxian. "Brother Zhong. As you know, I don't like to beat around the bush, so I'll just get straight to the main issue at hand. I want you to kill a man for me." "You want me to kill a man for you?" Zhongxian frowned. He had thought that the matter that Luo Shenqing was going to talk to him about was regarding Luo Ruoxin, But who would have thought that the latter would actually ask him to kill a man instead? As a master teacher and a member of civilized society, he believed that violence should always be the last resort, and he always made sure to conduct himself as such. Putting aside the couple of unfortunate accidents that would happen every now and then, the only time that he had truly played the role of an aggressor was when dealing with the Shenyuan kingdom. If possible, I would not make this request of you. But as long as this man remains alive, our Luo clan will never be able to live in peace. Luo Shenqing shook his head and sighed deeply. He would not make a move if there was another option, but this was a direct order from the first elder, and he himself knew what was at stake. There was simply no way around it. For his younger sister's sake, he would have to carry this out. What kind of man could possibly wield so much influence over the Luo clan? Zhongxian was astonished. As the second strongest sage clan on the master-teacher continent, the ranks of the Luo clan were filled with countless experts. And yet, there was actually a man in the world who could leave them feeling so uneasy. Just who could this incredible figure be? Surely, he would be helpless before a person whom even the Luo clan struggled to deal with. Do you still remember what I told you about my younger sister the previous time we met? Luo Shenqing asked. Zhongxian nodded in response. She's currently grounded in our clan. I recklessly summoned my dimension-sundering ordeal in hopes of gathering sufficient strength to save her, but it's a pity that I'm still far too weak, Luo Shenqing said with a solemn expression on his face. Zhongxian nodded once more. Even if the other party did not explain it to him, he had already guessed as much. Like I told you the previous time, the reason she's being grounded is because the clan found out that there's someone whom she already likes, and I requested you to help me investigate his identity, right? Luo Shenqing continued. Yes, I still remember that. I thought that there isn't any concrete news concerning that man yet, Zhongxian said with a frown. The last time that the other party had spoken to him about this matter, he had nearly been shocked out of his wits. Fortunately, it seemed like Luo Ruoxin had not revealed his identity. Nevertheless, that matter still left him feeling deeply pressured. Eventually, in order to save time and become an 8-star master teacher as quickly as possible, he had ended up challenging the Tower of Master Teachers. I have managed to gather new intelligence regarding the matter. During the period that my younger sister disappeared, she seems to have resided in a place known as the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy for quite a long period of time. I suspect that that man might be there as well, so I hope that you can head down there and root out that man, Luo Shenqing said. The Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. Zhongxian's lips twitched inconspicuously upon hearing those words, and his pupils narrowed slightly. With a slightly astonished voice, he asked, "It can't be that you want me to kill that man, can it?" Judging from where the flow of the conversation was heading, it appeared that Luo Shenqing was about to request him to assassinate himself. He really had no idea what he should make of this situation. While others might not know who the rumored lover of the Luo clan's little princess was, how could he possibly not know who that man was? It was already hard on him to be asked to investigate and uncover his own identity, and now, he even had to assassinate himself as well. This was ridiculous. As expected of my brother. You understand me well. Luo Shenqing nodded in satisfaction. Why do you want to kill him? Zhongxian asked with a frown. Won't the little princess be upset if he were to be killed? Luo Shenqing claimed that he doted on his younger sister, but here he was, plotting to kill the man his younger sister loved. Was that not hypocritical? Was it that difficult to simply grant her this simple wish? Would he only be happy after sending his younger sister down a road of tragedy, marrying a man who had never once appeared after their engagement? I know that she'll be upset, but this involves... Luo Shenqing exclaimed in agitation, but halfway through, he suddenly froze. After which, he shook his head with a deep sigh, clearly not wanting to delve any deeper into this topic. He raised his head to look at Zhongxian once more and said, "Just tell me whether you are willing to do it or not. As long as you root out that man and kill him, I'll accord you the position of at least an elder in the Luo clan." Elder? Zhongxian shook his head. I don't need anything like that. I only want to ask if the little princess knows if you are aiming to kill the man she loves. You do know that once she finds out about the matter, This will become a permanent rift in the relationship between the two of you. You'll never be able to go back to the old days anymore. I understand all of that, but I have no choice, the discomposed Luo Shenqing cried out with reddened eyes. How can there be no other choice? At this rate, she'll become nothing more than a pawn for power. Why can't she pursue her own happiness? Does she really have no choice but to marry that young prodigy from the Zhong clan? Zhong Xian exclaimed fervently. Under Zhong Xian's relentless questioning, Luo Shenqing finally snapped. Yes. She has no choice but to marry the young prodigy of the Zhong clan. There's no other option for her to choose. Chapter 14:20 Xingmeng's sword saying why? Zhong Xian asked lividly. To have to push his younger sister down a path that he knew she would never be happy with. No matter what, the Luo clan was still one of the most powerful sage clan in the master-teacher continent. They might be second to the Zhong clan, but they were definitely not subordinates of the Zhong clan. Shouldn't they at least possess dignity worthy of their positions? Honestly speaking, if he had not heard the news directly from the young master of the Luo clan, he would have thought that he was hearing fake news. That is your own younger sister. How can you possibly sacrifice her for a mere political marriage? Realizing that he had lost himself in the moment, Luo Shenqing forced himself to calm down before replying quietly, there are some things that you aren't qualified to know given your current standing and identity. Even I only have a partial understanding of the matter. I only know that in order to push forward this marriage, our Luo clan has already sacrificed far too much. If it fails to go through, not only will our Luo clan be in deep trouble, even mankind could very well find itself facing a catastrophe. Mankind? Zhong Xian narrowed his eyes in skepticism. To say that the failure of the marriage going through would actually result in a catastrophe for mankind, was this for real? Was it not making a mountain out of a molehill? No matter how he looked at it, Zhong Xian just could not help but find Luo Xuanqing's words utterly nonsensical. Judging from the look on Zhong Xian's face, Luo Shenqing could tell that the other party would not agree to his request if he did not make things clear today. So, he hesitated for a short moment before saying, on the account that you are a trustworthy person and a brother of mine, I can share the news with you. However, this matter has major implications, so you mustn't speak of it to another soul. Otherwise, it could possibly lead to a disastrous outcome. In truth, the marriage between the Zhong clan and the Luo clan concerns the secret behind the Celestial Amulet of Legacy. Celestial Amulet of Legacy? Zhong Xian's eyes slowly widened in astonishment as he heard those 4 words. He had heard of the Celestial Amulet of Legacy before. It was an artifact left behind by Kongsha, and it served as a key to the Temple of Confucius where the Great Codex of Spring of Autumn lay. Was the marriage between the Zhong clan and the Luo clan really that important? If Kongsha's most powerful artifact was really at stake, then saying that the entire fate of mankind was at stake would really be no joke. Indeed. However, I only heard of this news while eavesdropping on the conversation between our first elder and clan head, so unfortunately, I'm not too sure about the exact circumstances surrounding the matter, Luo Shenqing replied grimly. That is my younger sister we are talking about. How can I possibly be willing to shove her into the embrace of a person she has no fondness for? If not for the complicated circumstances surrounding the issue, putting aside him, not even the elders of the Luo clan would allow this marriage to go through. After all, given his younger sister's talent, there was a good chance that she could surpass even their ancestors. Once that happened, what would the Zhong clan count for? Nothing at all. Well, that was unless the young prodigy of the Zhong clan was even more powerful than her. But again, such a possibility was only minuscule at best. After all, in so many years, the only one whom he had seen come close to matching up to his younger sister was the young man standing before him, Zhong Xian. Given what is at stake, regardless of whether it's me or my younger sister, this is a responsibility that we won't be able to escape from. More importantly, this matter involves her as well. In any case, that man has to be killed at all costs. However, I can't do it myself. And there's no one other than you that I trust enough to entrust such an important task in. After saying those words, Luo Shenqing directed a deep gaze at Zhong Xian. This Zhongxian found himself at a loss for words. He knew that Luo Shenqing was in a difficult position. Even though he was close to Yuan Xiao, Bai Hongyan, and the others, it was unfortunate that they were affiliated with other major powers. They could be trusted under normal circumstances, but if there was a conflict of interest somehow in the future, they could very well choose to sacrifice their friendship to support their own clan. After all, they would soon take on important roles within their own clans, and by then, they would be responsible for the overall welfare of their clan. With such a heavy responsibility on their shoulders, they would have no choice but to sacrifice their personal will at times. Considering that the reputation of the Luo clan and Zhong clan were at stake for this matter, it would not be a good idea to entrust this matter to them. And after eliminating them from the picture, the only one who could be trusted and would not have any conflict of interest was him. "What's your choice?" Luo Shenqing asked intently. "I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that I won't be able to accept your request." Zhongxian shook his head. "Even if there are many things at stake, what does that have to do with me? Why should I sacrifice my everything in order to fulfill others? Besides, to make me assassinate myself. How do you expect me to accept such a request? I want to know why." A deep frown appeared in between Luo Xuanqing's forehead. He thought that the young man would accept his request unhesitatingly, but he had been rejected instead. Zhongxian paused for a moment, and eventually, he still decided against revealing his identity. "To tell you the truth, I have some urgent matters at the moment, and I need to head over to the Zhong clan right now. I don't think that I'll have the time to head down to the Qingyuan Empire and assassinate that man. Even if he wanted to reveal his identity, this was not the right moment to do so. If he had to do it, it should be done before the Zhong clan with him carrying the air of a conqueror." "You need to head over to the Zhong clan? For what?" Luo Shenqing was visibly surprised to hear that news. "The Zhong clan is holding its clan assembly very soon, and Jian Qinsheng hopes that I can challenge the Xingmeng Sword Saint's successors so as to exact vengeance for the humiliation he has suffered in the past," Zhongxian explained. "Jian Qinsheng? That old sword freak? I do recall him having a grudge with the head of the Zhong clan. Indeed, this is a good opportunity to put down the Zhong clan, so you should definitely go." Luo Shenqing was dazed for a moment before nodding in realization. What happened between the two of them? Is their grudge really just due to the difference in the sword quintessences they have comprehended? Zhongxian asked curiously. The sword quintessence that Jian Qinsheng had comprehended was relating to the flowing water swordsmanship, a defensive sword quintessence. Even though he had never seen the Xingmeng Sword Saint's swordsmanship before, it should be safe to assume that the sword quintessence that the latter had comprehended was vastly different from Jian Qinsheng's. Otherwise, the Zhong clan's genius, Zhong Shu, would not have been rejected by the will of the third sanctum head. Actually, it isn't that complicated. Do you know where the title Xingmeng Sword Saint originated from? Luo Shenqing asked. Zhongxian shook his head. All he knew about the Xingmeng Sword Saint was that the latter was the incumbent head of the Zhong clan, the father of the young prodigy. As for his true name and the origin of his nickname, he really did not know a thing at all. Could it be that his name is Zhong Xingmeng? Zhongxian asked with a frown. It would be truly hilarious if the head of the Zhong clan, one of the top experts on the master-teacher continent, had such a feminine name. Of course not. In truth, the Xingmeng in Xingmeng Sword Saint refers to two different individuals. It's derived from taking the Xing character from the name of the head of the Zhong clan and the Meng character from his wife's. When addressed separately, they are known as the Xing Sword Saint and the Meng Sword Saint. However, due to the overwhelming prowess from the combined might of their swordsmanship, which struck fear even in the hearts of the elders of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, they eventually came to be collectively known as the Xingmeng Sword Saint. Luo Shenqing explained. Hearing that, Zhongxian widened his eyes in astonishment. In order to become an elder of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, one's cultivation needed to have exceeded Saint 9 Dan, and yet, the both of them were still able to instill deep fear into the hearts of such experts. It was already beyond Zhongxian's imagination how powerful they could possibly be. Indeed. Back then, the both of them traveled across the entire Master-Teacher continent as a pair, and there was nearly no one who could match them. Even your teacher is filled with praise for them. Eventually, the Xing sword saint inherited the position of the deputy clan head and received the deepest heritage of the Zhong clan, thus pushing his strength and swordsmanship to greater heights. On the other hand, the Meng sword saint has rarely appeared since then, and as time went by, her previous reputation ended up being heaped on the Xing sword saint instead, resulting in very few knowing of her existence, Luo Shenqing explained. As a core member of the Luo clan, Luo Shenqing was well informed on those who stood at the top echelon of the master-teacher continent. I see. However, what does that have to do with Elder Jian Qinsheng? Could it be that he lost tragically to the Xing sword saint back then? Zhong Xian asked doubtfully. If there was not a deep-seated grudge between the both of them, there should not be a need for Jian Qinsheng to make use of the Zhong clan's clan assembly to get back at the Xing sword saint, right? That was almost as good as declaring his hostility toward the entire Zhong clan. Lost tragically? Tragically is an understatement. Luo Shenqing shook his head. If the news I have is accurate, it would appear that Elder Jian Qinsheng used to be a fervent pursuer of the Meng sword saint. Chapter 14:21 Revelation, Fervent Pursuer. Zhong Xian was stumped into silence. He had thought that it was just a simple rivalry, but to think that there would be so much drama behind it. Then again, he should have thought of it. Only such an emotion could possibly lead to so many years of persistence from Jian Qinsheng. For example, if he were to steal Luo Ruoxin away, the young prodigy of the Zhong clan would surely challenge him frenziedly for decades or even centuries to come. In the first place, those who practiced swordsmanship tended to be extremely obstinate and unyielding individuals, so how could they possibly be able to keep an open mind to other things? Indeed. I really have to say kudos to Jian Qinsheng's obstinacy. Even now, he's still unwilling to find another mate. Forget it, let's not talk about them anymore. Well, I do understand that it's important for you to head over to the Zhong clan. Luo Shenqing was deeply conflicted. Killing the man whom his younger sister had fallen in love with was important, but he was not willing to let such a good opportunity to humiliate the Zhong clan go either. Due to his younger sister, he had been tirelessly finding ways to put them down, and this was clearly a darn good occasion to do so. Indeed. Pardon me for not being of any help to you in this matter. Zhong Xian shook his head. A moment later, he raised his gaze once more and asked deeply, is it the Luo clan's or Zhong clan's intention to kill that man? Is there a difference between the two? Even if we don't make a move, the Zhong clan will very soon make a move too. By then, things would only get far more troublesome. Luo Shenqing shook his head. Ever since his younger sister had admitted her love for that man's fate had already been sealed. There was no way that the Zhong clan and Luo clan could allow this ticking time bomb to continue existing. Zhong clan. On the other hand, hearing that the Zhong clan had intentions to kill him too, Zhong Xian clenched his teeth in fury. How can they have the cheek to call themselves the #1 sage clan of the master-teacher continent when all they do is commit such despicable acts? Wait a moment, they are shameless, that's why. It was one thing to force Luo Ruoxin to marry the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, but now, they were even intending to kill him as well. Just how lawless could they get? It's fine. Luo Shenqing sighed deeply. It goes without saying, but you must keep all of this a secret. No matter the circumstances, it mustn't reach the ears of another soul. Don't worry, my lips are tightly sealed. Zhong Xian nodded. Actually, I think that it would be good for you to discuss this matter with the little princess before making a decision. Otherwise, this incident could drive a wedge in the relationship between you and your younger sister. Luo Shenqing was silent for a moment before nodding slowly. I'll think about that. The main issue was that his younger sister was still grounded, and he had no way to contact her, or else he definitely would have found a way to do so. I'll be taking my leave first then. Zhong Xian clasped his fist before heading for Jian Qinsheng's residence. Luo Shenqing watched as Zhong Xian vanished in the night sky before he shook himself out of his daze. He left the residence, too, but instead of returning back to his own accommodations, he headed to the Hall of Integrity. Walking up to the counter, he instructed, I want detailed intelligence about the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. It's an organization located in the Qingyuan Conferred Empire. Since he was unable to engage Zhong Xian's help for that matter, he had no choice but to do it himself. Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. Noted. Young Master Luo, please give me a moment. I'll look it up right now. The attendant was a young lady in her early 20s, and recognizing Luo Xianqing, she did not dare show the slightest bit of disrespect toward him. She quickly rushed into a room, and not too long later, she returned with a book in hand. Any information concerning master teachers would have to be submitted to the headquarters, and considering that the Sanctum of Sages was a subsidiary organization of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, there were various channels that they could use to procure the information. The Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy is located in Hongyuan Tier 1 Empire, and the strongest expert there is only at St. Wandan Pinnacle. The attendant began to recite the information in the book. Only St. Wandan Pinnacle? Luo Xuanqing's cheeks twitched. Were his younger sister's eyes not a little too poor? Even the strongest expert in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy was only at that level. Just what charm did that man possess to be able to win her fancy, such that she would even go against the Luo clan and Zhong clan for him? It's a low-ranked Master Teacher Academy capable only of grooming 6-star Master Teachers, so it's inevitable that the cultivators there would be slightly lacking, the attendant hurriedly replied. Where is it located? Luo Xianqing asked. It's located more than 1,000,000 li away from here. Saint 8 Dan beasts require roughly half a month of flight in order to reach there. Here is a map for your reference, the attendant said as she took out a map and showed it to Luo Xianqing. Half a month? That's still fine. Luo Xianqing heaved a sigh of relief. If he could get to the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy within half a month, he should be able to eliminate that man ahead of the Zhong clan. With a quick scan, Luo Xianqing swiftly memorized all of the details on the map before turning around to leave. However, before he could walk out of the doorstep, he suddenly recalled a matter and turned around to ask, do you happen to have any information on some of the more outstanding master teacher from the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy in recent years? Considering how his younger sister liked that man and was even full of praise for him, even if that man's cultivation and master teacher rank were only SOSO, he should still at least possess some exceptional talent in some field. In a small place like the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, he should be able to shine like a pearl amid pebbles, catching the eyes of everyone. The attendant pondered for a moment before replying, I'm afraid that I'm unable to access that information with my level of clearance. If young Master Luo isn't in a rush, I can invite an elder over to help you check on the matter. She was only an attendant of the Hall of Integrity, so she could only look into more general information. In order to obtain more detailed information such as the names of the master teachers residing in a location, they would require the clearance of an elder. After thinking about it for a brief moment, Luo Xianqing nodded. If he could find out the identity of the man whom his younger sister liked, he could assign others to do the job in his stead, thus avoiding the long journey down to the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. He waited for roughly an hour on the spot before an elder hurriedly walked out from one of the inner rooms of the Hall of Integrity. Whether it was Luo Xuanqing's standing as a core member of the Luo clan or his notorious title as the King of Destruction in the Sanctum of Sages, he was not someone whom ordinary managerial elders could afford to offend. The elder hurriedly walked up to Luo Xianqing and retrieved a book from his storage ring. He took a moment to swiftly flip through the entire book before he closed it and said, Young Master Luo, I have browsed through the records of all notable master teachers in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy over the past 5 years, and there is indeed one who enjoys great fame and prestige there. Enjoys great fame and prestige? Tell me more. Luo Xuanqing's eyes immediately lit up. This master teacher came to fame roughly half a year ago. He originates from a humble unranked kingdom, and with his own strength, he slowly paved his way up through the ranks. He has successfully crashed 2 master teacher pavilions, and he has foiled a major ploy from the otherworldly demonic tribe and slain 10 otherworldly demon kings and 1 otherworldly demon emperor, thus contributing immensely to mankind. Furthermore, he has successfully built a kingdom into an empire and groomed many talented students. Eventually, he even became the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, the elder said. No doubt about it, he must be the person I am looking for. Only their ancestor had ever successfully crashed a master teacher pavilion before. The fact that the other party was able to do it too showed that he was a man of great talent. That aligned with his younger sister's description. Most likely, that fellow was the person whom his younger sister liked. What's that person's name? Is he still in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy? Luo Shenqing asked. This. Young Master Luo, I'm afraid that I don't have the authority to track down his recent whereabouts. But as for his name, I think I should still be able to find it. His name is. As he spoke, the elder flipped open the book once more and took a closer look at the records. A moment later, his eyes narrowed in astonishment. Zhong Xian. Chapter 1422 I thought of you as my brother, but you flirted with my younger sister. Zhong Xian. Luo Xuanqing's eyes narrowed as well. He anxiously turned his gaze over to the elder and asked agitatedly, which Zhong and which Xian? Zhong, as in the Zhong with the side characters of bow and long, and Xian, as in the Xian from hanging on a noose, the elder explained. The both of them have the exact same name. This can't be possible, right? It was as if an explosion had occurred in Luo Xuanqing's mind. With widened eyes, he staggered backward weakly, his face pale with disbelief. That name was identical to that of his good brother. They couldn't possibly be the same person, right? He had only hung out with Zhong Xian because the young man's temperament was to his liking, and to him, all that really mattered was that the young man wasn't from the Dan Zhong clan. As such, he had never thought of looking into the young man's origin. Could he really be from Qingyuan Empire too? If that was truly the case, wouldn't that mean that the man he had been looking for was the very same person he had called his brother all this while? Luo Xuanqing's body trembled uncontrollably as the various scenes of how he came to meet Zhong Xian flashed across his mind. The first they met, the young man had said your sister to his face and ended up being pummeled into the ground. After the incident, the young man suddenly became exceptionally nice to him, never hesitating to offer a helping hand in his time of need. And all of this, it went without saying that he attributed them to his personal charisma. But could it actually be because of his younger sister? Young Master Luo. Noticing the huge fluctuations in Luo Xuanqing's mood, the elder couldn't help but quiver in fear, fearing that the other party would vent his anger on him. I'm fine, you don't have to worry about me. Luo Shenqing exhaled deeply and calmed himself down. I would like to look into the background of a student from our Sanctum of Sages elite division. It should be much easier to obtain information on a student in the Sanctum of Sages. Young Master Luo, whose background do you want me to look into? The elder asked. I want you to look into a student who has just enrolled into the Sanctum of Sages just earlier this year, Zhong Xian. Luo Shenqing said. Actually, there's no need to look up that. Zhong Shi is the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy that I have just spoken about. Hearing that name, the elder couldn't help but chuckle softly, and he remarked in admiration, despite coming from an unranked kingdom, Zhong Shi has managed to progress this far within a short period of time, successfully becoming an 8-star master teacher when he had just barely stepped into his 20s. Due to his legendary accomplishments, Zhong Shi is regarded as the new idol amongst the student populace of the Sanctum of Sages. In fact, the young lady who has attended to you earlier is his loyal fan. Idol? Fan? Luo Shenqing quickly turned his gaze toward the young lady who had attended to him earlier and saw that the latter's eyes were twinkling in reverence upon hearing her idol's name being called. It was to the point that he could almost imagine saliva streaming down the corner of her lips. Damn it! Luo Shenqing bellowed furiously as he stabbed his fingers deep into the flesh of his palm. In this moment, he felt as if a million ants were running across his scalp, and unimaginable rage bubbled furiously within him. In less than a month after coming to the Sanctum of Sages, that fellow had actually seduced so many young ladies, converting every single one of them into his devoted fan. Given how his younger sister had no experience with the opposite gender, it was no wonder why she would end up falling into that fellow's trap. I thought of you as my brother, but you flirted with my younger sister. More importantly, you even acted so innocently before me. Zhong Xian, just how much more shameless can you get? Luo Shenqing couldn't stop his lips from quivering in shock. He felt like he had fallen into the other party's trap right from the very start. He intentionally got close to me in order to obtain news about my younger sister. This won't do. I must kill that despicable bastard. Frenzied with fury, killing intent billowed through Luo Xuanqing's veins. Previously, he was still a little hesitant at the notion of killing his younger sister's lover, but now that he knew who that man was and the despicable means that man resorted to, he couldn't suppress his fury any longer. All along, you are the person whom my younger sister likes, and yet, you feigned ignorant whenever I brought up the topic, acting as if you were an outsider to the matter. To think that I actually thought of someone like you as my brother. This must be the greatest stain of my life. More importantly, I even foolishly told you everything I knew. It's no wonder why he turned down my request. How could he possibly kill himself? The more Luo Xuanqing thought about this matter, the more infuriated he became. If his emotions could materialize, the area around him would be swiftly overwhelmed by a raging inferno and burned down to cinders. This isn't good. Hurry up and get Elder Ji over. Tell him that the King of Destruction is going to destroy the Hall of Integrity. Seeing that the young man's strength was on the verge of bursting forth, the elder's face immediately paled in fright, and he hurriedly turned his head around to instruct the female attendant. As a managerial elder, his cultivation was only at St. Seven Dan, a long way off from matching up to Luo Xuanqing. If they were to go head-to-head with one another, there was no way he would be a match for the other party. Sensing the dangerous aura shrouding around the young man before him, he couldn't help but recall the various incredible accomplishments of the young man before him. At this point, there was little doubt that the young man was going to do something very soon. Yes, Elder, the attendant hurriedly nodded. But just as she was about to turn around and leave, Luo Xuanqing suddenly appeared right before her eyes. With reddened eyes, he roared, "Tell me, why do you revere that Zhongshen so much? Is he stronger than me? Is he more good-looking than me?" In terms of strength, he was a Saint 8 Dan expert, whereas Zhongshen was only at Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle. In terms of looks, that fellow was no different from a Fighter 1 Dan to his Saint 9 Dan. He just couldn't understand why others would idolize that fellow instead of him. Wah! Feeling the immense pressure that Luo Xuanqing was emanating, the young lady's face paled in fright, and she began to bawl uncontrollably. "Let go of her," the elder bellowed angrily. It was only in this moment that Luo Xuanqing finally regained his rationality, but even that was insufficient to quench the indignance that he felt inside. To show a look of reverence when speaking of Zhongshen, only to be scared into tears when facing him. Why? The elder could guess what Luo Xuanqing was thinking of just by the look on his face, and he suddenly felt completely speechless. Just by that terrifying look on your face, it would take a miracle for any girl to like you. Take a look at Zhongshen. Even before the most frightening lightning tribulation, he was still able to stand firmly with a composed smile on his face, diving into it fearlessly and eventually send it fleeing even. Now, take a look at yourself. How can you ever begin to compare with him? Forget it, I'll kill that fellow right now. Knowing that he wouldn't be able to get an answer out of the female attendant's mouth, Luo Xuanqing spat coldly as he dashed straight for Jian Qingqing's residence. Now that he had found out that Zhongshen was the culprit who had seduced his younger sister, there was no reason for him to hesitate anymore. There would be more than enough time for him to think the matter through after smashing that fellow's head into the ground. It didn't take long before he was standing right above Jian Qingqing's residence, and he bellowed loudly, "Luo Xuanqing is here to pay a visit to Elder Jian." His deep voice reverberated deafeningly throughout the entire residence, reminiscent of the rumbling of thunder. "Luo Xuanqing, what are you up to this time around?" A mere instant after Luo Xuanqing's loud voice echoed throughout the entire residence, an infuriated voice suddenly sounded. Following which, a beautiful figure flew over. "Shui Qianro, what are you doing here?" Luo Xuanqing was so surprised to see the young lady that the imposing disposition he carried a moment ago began withering away. "Jian Qingqing is my teacher, so there shouldn't be any problem with me living in his residence, right?" Shui Qianro harumphed coldly. "Like I have told you before, I don't have the slightest bit of feelings for you. If you continue harassing me like this, I'll have no choice but to call on my clan to deal with you." Luo Xuanqing was rendered speechless. The truth was that when he boasted to Zhongxian back then that he had a beautiful girlfriend, he wasn't entirely lying, it was just that his beautiful girlfriend of his hadn't accepted his confession yet. And the unbelievably beautiful girlfriend he had referred to then was none other than Shui Qianrou. Luo Shenqing was intending to say that he wasn't here for Shui Qianrou but Zhongxian, but the latter's words triggered the intense feelings of indignance within him once more, and he exclaimed, "Just what kind of man do you like? I can always change if there's anything I'm lacking in." Given the outstanding and dashing man he was, why didn't the other party like him? He simply couldn't understand it. "What kind of man do I like?" Shui Qianrou harumphed coldly. "The man that I like must possess unparalleled talent in swordsmanship. He must possess utmost discerning eyes that are capable of seeing through and complementing all of my flaws, and more importantly, he must be able to impart to me profound swordsmanship." "Impart to you profound swordsmanship? It can't be that." Luo Shenqing suddenly widened his eyes as he shook his head in disbelief, hoping that everything was just his imagination. "That's right, I like men who are like Zhongxian. As for you," Shui Qianrou waved her hands disdainfully, "you should just give it a rest. Luo Shenqing is asking him what are the Chinese characters for Zhongxian's name to see if it might just be another person with a similar sounding name. In Chinese, there are many words that have the same pronunciation but different meaning and characters. For example, and are both pronounced as Zhong and have the exact same intonation but have different meanings. For Zhong, it consists of two parts, namely bo and long. As for Xian, it could mean suspense or hanging, but perhaps the elder has some grudge with Zhongxian, he decides to describe it in the worst way possible by referring it to hanging. Chapter 1423 The Little Princess's Rex, You Bastard. Luo Xuanqing's rage finally reached the peak and exploded. It was one thing for the younger sister whom he doted on so dearly to be seduced by that fellow whose emotional quotient could be said to be pretty much zero, but to think that the goddess whom he had been infatuated with for so many years would actually be full of admiration for him too. At this moment, no words could begin to describe how crazed he felt on the inside. "I treated you as my brother, but you ended up seducing my younger sister and the person I love. Unforgivable. Zhongxian, you better scram out here right now." Unable to hold it back any longer, Luo Shenqing roared in fury. Seeing how the other party's words were getting more and more overboard, daring to threaten Zhongshe even, Shui Qianrou finally snapped, "Luo Shenqing, Zhongshe has already left for the Zhong clan together with my teacher. If you continue causing trouble around here, don't blame me for activating the sword formation." "What the heck is wrong with you? I have already made everything clear to you, why are you still going on a rampage over here? Previously, you claimed that as long as I were to meet someone I like, you would give up and back away quietly. I should have already made it very clear to you that I like Zhongshe, so why are you still causing such a huge commotion here, even threatening to beat him up? Do you really think I dare not activate the formation on you? If you were to continue causing trouble here shamelessly, I don't mind teaching you a lesson." After receiving Zhongxian's pointers, Shui Qianrou had become more highly regarded by Jian Qinsheng, such that she was even imparted with the method to control the formation inscribed into the residence. "He has already left. I'll just have to chase him back then." Making a quick calculation, Luo Shenqing realized that it was indeed very likely that Zhongxian had already left. Thus, he immediately flitted off in the direction of the Zhong clan without any hesitation. That madman. Not expecting Luo Shenqing to come over in the middle of the night to cause such a huge uproar, only to leave before finishing his piece, Shui Qianrou was rendered speechless. She would have to be an utter fool to fall for a person that lacking in maturity. In the end, Zhongshe was the only one who could really be thought of as perfect. Well, he would have been even more perfect if his words could have been any nicer. But again, geniuses tended to have extremely individualistic personalities, and she was perfectly fine with his personality too. Oblivious to Shui Qianrou's fangirling, Luo Shenqing dashed straight for 3 days and 3 nights, till the last droplet of zhenqi within his body had been depleted. But even so, he was still unable to find any traces of Zhongxian and the others. Before long, he was completely sapped of his strength and had no choice but to come to a halt, and in the next instant, a mouthful of fresh blood spurted from his mouth. He had been too overwhelmed with rage earlier that he was completely oblivious to his current physical state, but as soon as he came to a halt, he felt a feeling of weakness swiftly consuming his entire body, placing him on the verge of fainting. Even as a Saint 8 Dan expert, he was still incapable of maintaining flight at full speed for 3 days straight without any rest. Not to mention, the consecutive shocks he had sustained earlier had caused his Zhenqi flow to descend into severe disarray. If not for the strong cultivation foundation that he had built up over the years, his cultivation could have very well gone berserk. From the looks of it, it seems like there's no way I'll be able to catch up with them anymore. Seated by the edge of a cliff, Luo Shenqing panted heavily as he thought with gritted teeth. Jian Qinsheng and Zhong Xian had left on an aerial saint beast. As fast as he may be, if he couldn't see any traces of them after chasing them for so long, it didn't seem too plausible that he would be able to catch up with them anymore. But not only did that fellow dupe him, he even seduced his younger sister and his goddess. It would be hard to quell the burning rage within his heart if he couldn't at least give the other party a beating he would never forget. Should I contact my clan and have them liaise with the Zhong clan to deal with that fellow? A thought suddenly popped up in Luo Xuanqing's head. As long as he told his clan that the person whom his younger sister liked had gone to the Zhong clan, they would surely be able to make ample preparations to trap and eliminate that fellow. With the two most powerful sage clans moving in unison to deal with him, there was no way Zhong Xian would be able to get away, but somehow, the thought of Zhong Xian dying made the usually decisive him hesitate a little somehow. But the first elder has also instructed me to get close and avoid any conflicts with him. Furthermore, he's the direct disciple of Yang Shi too. Luo Shenqing was in a dilemma. It was imperative for him to accomplish the missions assigned to him by the clan, and the first elder did give him two clear missions. One was to get on close terms with Zhong Xian, and the other one was to kill the man his younger sister liked. But now that the two of them turned out to be the same person, was he to get close to him, or should he kill him? At the same time, he suddenly felt that it might have been a little too rash of him to conclude that Zhong Xian was the person whom his younger sister liked. While it was true that the latter was from the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy too, it could have just been a coincidence. All of these thoughts swarmed Luo Xuanqing's mind at once, leaving him feeling deeply lost all of a sudden. At this moment, his eyebrows suddenly shot up. He flicked his wrist, and a communication jade token appeared in his palm. Tapping his finger on it lightly, there was a light who, before an incomparably beautiful and seemingly flawless figure appeared before his sight. "Sis, aren't you grounded by the clan? How did you manage to contact me?" Luo Shenqing widened his eyes upon seeing the other party, and he asked in agitation. The person who was at the other end of the communication jade token was no other than his younger sister, the little princess of the Luo clan. "The clan might have grounded me, but sending out a message is nothing too difficult to me," the young lady replied. After assimilating the dimension silencer, her comprehension of space could be said to have reached a level comparable to their founder. If she wanted to, she could easily decipher the seal which the first elder and the others had set up without alerting them. "That's a relief. I happen to have something I need to verify with you." Heaving a sigh of relief, Luo Shenqing was just about to begin speaking when the young lady before him anxiously waved her hands and interjected. "Brother, I need you to hear me out first. Even back when we were still young, you have always been very doting of me, looking out for me at every corner and secretly getting me what I want, and I am really grateful for that. There is one thing which I really need your help, and I hope that you can offer me your strength." Luo Shenqing could roughly fathom what his younger sister was about to say, but facing her pleading and desperate eyes, he hesitated for a brief moment before eventually nodding in agreement. "As long as it's within my means, I'll do my best to help you." For his younger sister, he would even tread up a mountain of blades or dive into a sea of flames for her if he needed to. Hearing those words, relief visibly flickered across the young lady's face. "As you know, I already have someone that I like. Our clan has already dispatched some men to the place where I have been to, and there's no doubt that they will attempt to kill him. I hope that you can protect him. Please, don't allow any harm to come to him." "You want me to protect him?" Luo Xuanqing's eyes widened in astonishment. "That's right." The young lady nodded. He's only an ordinary cultivator. He shouldn't lose his life just because I like him. This isn't fair for him. She turned her gaze toward Luo Shenqing, and with an expectant and pleading look in her eyes, she said, "Brother, you know that I have never pleaded anyone for anything, but just this once. I'm pleading with you, please protect him." Luo Xuanqing's clenched fists trembled uncontrollably. He wanted to tell her that he had already promised the clan to kill that fellow, but in the end, he still held himself back at the very last moment. In the end, he still couldn't bear to see his younger sister unhappy. He took in several deep breaths before nodding in resignation. "I'll protect him. I knew that you are the best. I'll be entrusting him to you then." A beautiful smile reminiscent of a flower bloomed on the young lady's lips. "No matter what, please look after him and don't allow anyone to hurt him. I'll have to go now. Even though I'm able to send messages out, the others might notice that something is amiss if I do so too frequently, and that could cause unnecessary complications." As she said those words, the young lady's silhouette began to flicker, and it seemed as if her image would dissipate at any moment soon. "Wait a moment. You told me to protect the person that you liked, but you haven't told me what his name is and where he is at the moment." Even though he had a good idea whom the person was, he still wanted to verify it with his younger sister. "His name Zhongxian, and is currently in Qingyuan Empire." The young lady's voice drifted across with a tone filled with sodade and fondness before gradually dissipating along with her silhouette. "As I expected." Hearing his younger sister's confirmation, Luo Xuanqing's face turned frighteningly livid. Zhongxian. Even Luo Shenqing himself was unable to clearly discern his current emotions, whether it rage or indignance that he was feeling. But these emotions swarmed relentlessly to his mind and to his heart, leaving him feeling as if he would explode from them. Achoo! Amidst the sky, Zhongxian was seated on the back of a saint beast when he suddenly sneezed. Rubbing his nose, a confused look appeared on his face. "Is someone thinking of me again? Being too outstanding sure is troublesome." Hi. Chapter 1424. Studying the Sanctum Head Token. He had been sneezing ever since he left the Sanctum of Sages. The person who was thinking of him sure was persistent. "That's why I should maintain a low profile at all times. Otherwise, if Luo Ruoxin realizes that so many people like me, she won't be happy," Zhongxian thought with a nod. And to be honest, he had indeed been much more low profile ever since he entered the Sanctum of Sages. The only time he had been high profile was when he challenged the Tower of Master Teachers. Otherwise, how could the cultivation technique forest and even the entire inner sanctum still be intact? He had already been actively trying to play it cool. It sure is tiring maintaining a low profile, Zhongxian thought as he rubbed his glabella. If not for his wish to maintain a low profile, he would have simply taken vicious upper body out. At the very least, he would not have just stopped with challenging a mere Tower of Master Teachers and breaking a couple of records. Do you know how difficult it was to suppress myself? However, this worked out fine as well. It was aligned with his humble personality anyway. Having spent a year as a cultivator, he understood the deep importance of maintaining a low profile. If he had gone around boasting about his strength and trump cards like his clone did, he probably would have already died. After a brief moment of thought, he flicked his wrist, whipped out a token, and began assessing it closely. It was the Sanctum Head token that he had received from Sage Kuei. The first layer of the seal on it had unraveled back when he received his 8-star Master Teacher emblem after clearing the Tower of Master Teachers. However, he had not had the time to examine it closely back then. Since he had some time on his hand now, it would be a good opportunity to study its changes. At this very moment, the Sanctum Head token was emanating a warm glow. Stroking it lightly with his hand, he could immediately feel a will surging into his consciousness. Even though his physical body remained motionless in the real world, he felt as if his consciousness was being dragged into a peculiar space. Who? The next thing he knew, Sage Kuei was standing right before him with a faint smile on his lips. "You sure became an 8-star Master Teacher fast. The rate at which you are growing has far surpassed my imagination." A hint of approval could be heard in Sage Kuei's voice. How far have you cultivated your divine eyes of the ninth netherworld to? Let me take a look. Regarding that, to be honest, I haven't started cultivating that optic art yet, Zhongxian replied awkwardly. There were simply so many errors in that optic art that he could not bring himself to cultivate it. In fact, after he had obtained it, he could not even be bothered to give it a second glance. Hearing those words, Sage Kuei frowned. If you don't cultivate the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld, how are you going to remove the seals on the Sanctum Head token and be officially inaugurated as the new Sanctum Head? The most crucial requirement for becoming the real Sanctum Head was the cultivation of the Eye of Insight to the realm of Demon Vanquisher, and it was impossible to reach that level without cultivating the optic art. I do want to cultivate it, but the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld is a little. Never mind. Do you have any optic arts with you? If possible, I would like to borrow a couple of them for reference purposes. Fearing that Sage Kuei would be unable to take the trauma if he criticized the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld once more, Zhongxian swiftly changed his words. The cultivation of the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld would only be a viable option to him after he successfully upgraded it into a Heaven's Path battle technique. After all, he had no intention of cultivating a battle technique only to end up becoming colorblind or even completely blind at that. Only my teacher, ancient sage Bo Shong, has the ability to create a battle technique as profound and abstract as optic art. There's no way you will be able to find another optic art out there on the master teacher continent. Sage Kuei shook his head. May I know which part of the optic art you are confused about? Feel free to speak of it, and I'll slowly explain it to you. It's fine. I'll try deciphering it myself for now. Zhongxian shook his head. It seemed like, in terms of capabilities, Sage Kuei still came nowhere close to comparing to ancient sage Qiu Wu. The latter's fragmented souls were still capable of communicating with one another, whereas the Sage Kuei in front of him was clearly unaware of his conversation with the Sage Kuei in the Mountain Gate examination. It's fine. A displeased look materialized on Sage Kuei's face. What do you mean by that? In order to become the next Sanctum Head, you must cultivate the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld. I have spent many years cultivating that technique, and my insights will allow you to swiftly grasp the technique. Or perhaps, do you think that your understanding of the technique is even deeper than mine? Elder, that's not what I mean. To tell you the truth, there's a doubt that has been in my mind for a while that I would like to clarify with you. Knowing that Sage Kuei's time was probably limited, Zhongxian did not want to waste time talking about the divine eyes of the ninth netherworld. At this point, he suddenly recalled what he had noted back at the inner sanctum, so he decided to make use of this opportunity to obtain some answers. Feel free to speak. Hearing that Zhongxian had a question to ask him, Sage Kuei flicked his hand behind his back grandly and assumed the image of a powerful expert. If I'm not mistaken, there's a skeletal frame of an otherworldly demon emperor in a sculpture of yours in the inner sanctum. I'm curious to know how you managed to suppress its aura to the point where it's almost indiscernible. Zhongxian revealed his doubts. He had been wondering about this matter ever since leaving the inner sanctum, but he was just unable to make sense of it. Since Sage Kuei's will had appeared before him once more, this would be a good opportunity for him to seek an answer to that. You know that there's a skeletal frame of an otherworldly demon emperor in my sculpture. Sage Kuei's eyes widened in astonishment. In an instant, the image of a powerful expert that he had just built up shattered, and disbelief could clearly be seen on his face. Indeed. If I'm not mistaken, the otherworldly demon emperor was an ancient figure in your era known as Vicious. Zhongxian elaborated. Considering that Sage Kuei was Kongsha's grandstudent, he should have heard of Vicious. You know of Vicious? Sage Kuei's cheeks began twitching. How did you manage to seal his upper body in your sculpture without any hint of his aura leaking out? Zhongxian asked once more. This. Sage Kuei was stunned. Hearing the affirmative tone behind the young man's voice, Sage Kuei hesitated for a brief moment before sighing deeply. Since you have already seen through this much, I guess there's no harm in telling you the truth. You're right, the skeletal frame that is sealed in that sculpture in the inner sanctum indeed belongs to Vicious. Many years ago, when I first found it, a will had already developed within it. In order to prevent its resurrection, I could only make use of Kong Shi's strength to suppress it. Kong Shi's strength? Yes. The inner sanctum is located in the very center of the formations of the 5 halls, and by using Kong Shi's personal handwriting and the fortune harnessed in this very land, I was able to suppress it thoroughly, to the point where it's rendered completely helpless to retaliate, Sage Kuei explained. Hearing that, Zhongxian swiftly went through the relative position of the inner sanctum to the 5 halls, and indeed, the inner sanctum was located at the very center of their formations. That would explain why it was so rich in spiritual energy and the overwhelming academic aura that lingered there. Back then, when Vicious fought against Kongsha, his strength had already reached a level surpassing all ancient sages on the master-teacher continent. At his peak, he was an entity whom none of us could match. In order to prevent his resurrection, I could only make use of all resources I had at my disposal to suppress him. Sage Kuei shook his head. After which, he turned a doubtful gaze to Zhongxian and asked, "The aura of the skeletal frame should have been suppressed to the point where it's completely indiscernible. How did you manage to notice it when your eye of insight is only at the 3rd realm?" There had been several generations of sanctum heads prior to him, and their mastery of the eye of insight had far exceeded his, but even so, they had been unable to notice the presence of the skeletal frame. Yet, the young man before him had actually noticed that something was in the sculpture and was even able to discern what it was clearly. How in the world did he manage to do it? "I only managed to notice it by coincidence," Zhongxian replied perfunctorily, not bothering to explain. "Regardless of how you noticed it, listen to my advice and don't even try to touch it. Even Saint Nine Dan cultivators might not necessarily have the strength to stand against it." Seeing that Zhongxian was unwilling to talk too much about the matter, Sage Kuei did not probe. Nevertheless, he still felt compelled to issue a warning. "What if I have the confidence to tame the skeletal frame and prevent it from doing harm? Would it be fine if I take it out?" Zhongxian asked. Given that he possessed the Book of Heaven's Path, not to mention that Vicious' head was under his control, he was very certain that he would be able to take down Vicious' upper body too. However, he was just unsure if there was any way that he could retrieve the upper body without resulting in any adverse consequences for the inner sanctum. "You want to tame Vicious' skeletal frame?" Hearing those words, Sage Kuei was clearly startled for a moment before he shook his head. "It's good that you intend to contribute to mankind, but I can tell you for certain that it's impossible. Even Kong Shi failed to do it back then, so do you think that you'll really be able to do it?" Chapter 1425 Who is the Sanctum Head? It was no wonder why Sage Kuei didn't believe Zhongxian was able to do it. If even Kong Shi was unable to accomplish that deed, there was little hope that anyone in the master-teacher continent would be able to do so. Just the fact that Vicious was able to trap Kong Shi back then was more than enough to show how powerful he was. Considering how Zhongxian's cultivation was only at a mere Grand Dominion realm pinnacle, it wouldn't make any difference no matter what kind of incredible means he had up his sleeves. "You don't believe me?" Noting Sage Kuei's expression, Zhongxian chuckled lightly and said, "Follow me." After saying those words, he retracted his consciousness back to his physical body and went into his myriad ant hive nest. Then, he grabbed the token tightly once more. Boom! A massive head appeared within the myriad ant hive nest. It floated quietly in midair, emanating a frightening aura. "Master!" Vicious greeted. "This." Sage Kuei's will flickered wildly, nearly dissipating on the spot. Having once suppressed Vicious, he could identify the latter's will and body with ease. Even though the massive head was a celestial designer artifact, the will and life within it was indubitably Vicious. To think that the legendary Vicious who had Kong Shi trapped for 3 whole months in the ancient era would actually end up serving a young lad as his master. "I have successfully tamed his heart, finger, and head, and I'm in the midst of collecting his other parts. Since his skeletal body with you, is there any way I can retrieve it safely? I think this would also be much safer in the long run as well," Zhongxian said. Naturally, the best-case scenario was for him to retrieve the skeletal frame without causing the collapse of the inner sanctum. In the very depths of his heart, he didn't like causing destruction at all. Wherever it could be avoided, it should be avoided. Besides, once he became the sanctum head, the inner sanctum could be said to be under him as well, and destroying his own home base didn't seem like a very good idea. This can't be happening. Sage Kuei was still overwhelmed by the sheer shock of what he had seen, and his body flickered in and out of existence. He's already right before your eyes, and I believe you can tell for yourself whether he's really vicious or not. Seeing Sage Kuei's excessive reaction toward such a trivial matter, Zhongxian couldn't help but shake his head in disapproval. How in the world can you be shocked at every single thing? Are you sure that you are really Kong Shi's grand student? Somehow, it feels like you are a countryside bumpkin who hasn't seen the larger world outside yet. No matter how formidable Vicious was when he was alive, he had been divided into many pieces after his death, and every individual part wasn't particularly powerful. As such, it shouldn't come as much of a shock that he managed to tame them. It took some time before Sage Kuei finally recovered from his shock. With a bitter smile, he said, "Since you are capable of taming him, I guess there should be no harm handing the skeletal frame over to you. However, the seal to decipher it is rather complicated, so it might be quite troublesome on your part. Please enlighten me." Hearing that there was a method to retrieve Vicious' upper body without causing any destruction, Zhongxian hurriedly clasped his fist. "I sealed the skeletal frame using a spatial secret art so as to fuse it entirely with my sculpture. If you wish to separate the both of them, you must destroy it and..." In the midst of his words, Sage Kuei's will flickered once more, and before he could finish his words, he had already vanished from the spot with a light as if an extinguished candle flame. It seemed like the shock he had received had far exceeded his tolerance limit, causing him to dissipate on the spot. Zhongxian was frenzied. Just what in the heck was wrong with these ancestors? How in the world could each of them be so unreliable? Kong Shi disappeared in the midst of his words, ancient sage Qiu Wu did so too, and now, even this fellow was doing it too. Was it some kind of tradition for them to do that, or was this just a twisted sense of humor they had back in their era? Forget it. Even though Zhongxian felt deeply stifled, he knew that there was no point for him to lose temper now, especially since Sage Kuei was already gone. Thus, he could only rub his glabella and turn his eyes back to the sanctum head token. After the removal of the first seal, it had visibly become more smooth and radiant, and ripples of powerful energy could be seen flowing on its surface, reflecting the massive might that it wielded. Is this a Saint Pinnacle artifact? Zhongxian's eyes lit up in excitement as he stroked its surface with his fingers lightly. He wasn't too sure just what tier the item was, but he was certain that it was far stronger than the Lingshu sword in his possession. If the two of them were to clash with one another, it was almost certain that the one to shatter would be his Lingshu sword. Just from that in itself, it could be seen that the token was definitely a Saint Pinnacle artifact at the very minimum. But perhaps it was due to the presence of the seal. Despite its high tier, there wasn't the slightest hint of spirit infused into the token. Its only unique property seemed to be its resilient exterior and its peculiarly sharp tip. Nevertheless, it could still display exceptional might when utilized in the right situation. Even a Saint 8 Dan cultivator could be easily cornered by the prowess of a Saint Pinnacle artifact. As long as he were to use it well, he might be able to slay even the Netherworld Azure Dragon beast. As expected of the personal artifact of the Sanctum Head, it was indeed no ordinary treasure. I wonder what kind of changes would happen to the token once I unseal the second layer of seal. The changes in the token after the unsealing of its first seal was already quite a huge surprise in itself, so Zhongxian couldn't help but wonder what would happen once the second seal was unsealed too. While Zhongxian was chatting with Sage Kuei and examining the Sanctum Head token closely, in the premier hall of the Sanctum of Sages, where generations of Sanctum Heads and Deputy Sanctum Heads resided, brilliant rays of light began bursting forth in close intervals, and the flurried chimes of a bell could be heard booming across the entire area. What's happening? Zhongshi, Elder Ge, and the others hurriedly rushed over to the Grand Hall as they exclaimed in astonishment. As a representation of the authority of the Sanctum of Sages, no one would ever dare to fool around here. Just what in the world could have happened to induce such a huge commotion? It's coming from the sculptures of the preceding Sanctum Heads, an elder exclaimed. Everyone hurriedly turned their sights over and saw the many sculptures of the many generations of sanctum heads shaking non-stop. The deafening bell chimes were echoing from them. The trembling of the sculptures should be a representation of their shock. But what could have happened to leave them in such a state? Elder Ge muttered in astonishment. Every single generation of sanctum head was a top-notch expert, possessing experience and eye of discernment that far surpassed any other cultivator in the master-teacher continent. It was unimaginable just what kind of major incident could have happened to have placed them in such a state. This was inconceivable. Could this mean the sanctum head token has surfaced? A thought suddenly came to Zhonsh's mind, and he muttered softly with a pale face. The sanctum head token has surfaced. Do you mean that the sanctum of sages is about to usher in another true sanctum head? The many elders gathered in the area hurriedly turned their sights to Zhonshe. Only a true sanctum head candidate would have the right to wield and control the sanctum head token. If that artifact had surfaced once more, it would spell that the real sanctum head was on the rise as well. That's right. That person should have received Sage Kuei's approval and successfully removed one of the seals on it. Otherwise, it shouldn't be possible for such a huge commotion to occur. Zhonshe nodded. But in order to become the sanctum head, one must possess the eye of insight. Just who could that person be? The faces of the crowd reddened in agitation. Each time a real sanctum head appeared, the overall prowess of the sanctum of sages would surge forth, as if entering an era of swift development. It would be truly beneficial to them with a true sanctum head were to appear at this moment and lead them forward, especially during this era which felt like the calm before the storm. The sanctum head candidate's identity won't be revealed until he fully awakens the sanctum head token. Zhonshe said grimly. It was a tradition for the sanctum head candidate to conceal his identity until the inauguration ceremony. This served as a mean to protect the sanctum head until he gained the strength to protect himself. Given the huge commotion that had occurred, it seemed like the sanctum head candidate had received the approval of the preceding sanctum heads, but the fact that he hadn't revealed his identity yet likely meant that he wasn't fully ready to succeed as the next sanctum head yet. A moment later, Zhonshe instructed, "Go and check who recently made a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan or successfully became an 8-star master teacher." As the deputy sanctum head, he was still aware of the various conditions required to remove the seals on the sanctum head token. All right, one of the elders hurriedly backed out of the room, and soon, he returned with a look of disbelief on his face. Reporting to Zhonshe, Yangshe's student, Fengzai has challenged the Tower of Master Teachers and cleared it. Chapter 1426 Carnate Sainthood. Fengzi also successfully cleared the Tower of Master Teachers. A wave of silence swept across the crowd. Zhonshe and the others were rendered speechless. In the several dozen millenniums since the creation of the Tower of Master Teachers, there had only been 3 people who had managed to clear the trial. Just what in the world had happened recently? There had been 2 consecutive challenges, and both of them had actually cleared it. How long did he take? One of the elders could not resist asking. Zhongxian had used roughly 15 minutes, so how long did Fengzi take to clear it? Almost an entire day, the elder who had gone out to investigate earlier replied. A day. His record might be beneath that of Zhongshe, but it's definitely an outstanding achievement. Considering how the wills of the sanctum heads began reacting right after he became an 8-star master teacher, could he possibly be the sanctum head candidate? Zhonshe deduced. I think it's very likely. The other elders swiftly nodded in agreement. Even though Zhongshe had cleared the Tower of Master Teachers very quickly, there was no peculiar phenomenon occurring right after he cleared it. On the other hand, just moments after Fengzi became an 8-star master teacher, the wills of the sanctum heads began trembling in shock. Could it be that he had received Sage Kuei's recognition and become the only current candidate to the position of the sanctum head? But considering how Fengzi is Yangshe's direct disciple, it's only a matter of time before he returns to the master teacher pavilion headquarters. Why would Sage Kuei choose him as a sanctum head candidate? I have no idea either. However, Sage Kuei's wisdom is not something that the likes of us can fathom, and perhaps, He might have seen something far beyond what we can see. To be honest, if a sanctum head does appear in this generation, I would think that the likelihood of Zhongshe being him is higher. According to the rumors I have heard, his Fengzi is senior, and on the whole, the capability and the potential that he has displayed far surpasses that of the other students. One of the requirements to becoming a sanctum head candidate is the possession of the Eye of Insight. No matter how talented Zhongshe may be, even if he's on par with the little princess of the Luo clan, as long as he doesn't possess the Eye of Insight, all would be for naught. That's true. Frowns emerged on the elders' faces as they heatedly discussed the issue with one another. Both Zhongxian and Fengzi were possible sanctum head candidates. It was still impossible for them to confirm which of the two it would be, but most of them were leaning toward Fengzi. I think there's at least a 90% chance that it's Fengzi. Zhongshe would likely be the one to succeed Yangshe's position in the future, so there wouldn't be a problem for Fengzi to take on the role of our sanctum head. In the first place, the elders were all working on speculation, so even after a lengthy discussion, they were still unable to come to a conclusion. Eventually, Zhongshe stepped forward and said, "All right, there's no point debating this anymore. We have narrowed the potential sanctum head candidate to just 2 people, and that's good progress. For the time being, make sure that none of what we have discussed today gets leaked. Also, none of you are to show any disrespect to the 2 of them, and make sure to satisfy every one of their requests wherever possible." The elders nodded. Understood. The Zhong clan was located a far distance away from the Sanctum of Sages. Even when riding on Jian Qinsheng's tamed aerial beast, it would still take nearly an entire month to get there. With too much free time on his hands, after he was done examining the Sanctum head token, Zhongxian began reinforcing his cultivation. It took him 3 days to fully reinforce his Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle cultivation, and after that, he spent a couple more days retempering his physical body and primordial spirit. Afterward, he suddenly found himself at a complete loss over what he should do. Eventually, he ended up spending most of his time discussing swordsmanship with Jian Qinsheng, and the latter benefited greatly from his unique and sharp insights regarding swordsmanship. With that leisurely atmosphere, 20 days passed in a flash. We should be reaching the Zhong clan in around 2 days' time. Studying the meandering mountain range and long rivers beneath them, Jian Qinsheng swiftly deduced their location, and he could not help but tremble in agitation. Just 2 more days, and he would be able to cleanse himself of the humiliation that he had suffered so far. He would be able to trample that haughty and boastful Xingmeng sword saint beneath his feet. Just the thought of it was sufficient to leave surges of exhilaration coursing through his body. If we barge in on the Zhong clan's clan assembly and challenge them on such a grand occasion, wouldn't it be in breach of the master teacher's value of propriety? Zhongxian asked Jian Qinsheng. As much as he wanted to teach the Zhong clan a lesson, he was also well aware of his identity as a master teacher. He had to pay careful heed to his standing and act within the scope of what was deemed appropriate by society. To tell you the truth, I'm not the one who initiated this challenge. On the contrary, they were the ones who invited me over to challenge them. The Zhong clan's clan assembly is more than just an occasion for the members of the Zhong clan to gather and discuss major affairs. More than that, it's also used as a platform for the Zhong clan to reinforce their prestige and influence as the #1 sage clan in the master teacher continent. Jian Qinsheng harumphed coldly. The Zhong clan would usually send out invitations to others to attend their clan assembly. The motive was simple, to display the overwhelming might of the Zhong clan to the rest of the world. If it had been in the past, Jian Qinsheng would have surely become nothing more than a stepping stone to further the Zhong clan's reputation. But now that he had Zhongxian, a one-of-kind genius who had successfully grasped 2 sword quintessences, on his side, no matter how powerful the younger generation cultivators of the Zhong clan were, who could possibly be a match for him? Do they send out invitations to all major powers? Zhongxian asked doubtfully. I'm not too sure either, but that does seem to be the case. For every clan assembly that they've hosted so far, they invited many people from all walks of life to participate. There were demonic tunists, apothecaries, blacksmiths, beast tamers. Most occupation guilds received a couple of invitations, and they dispatched their most outstanding juniors to attend. While the pretext was to have them observe the clan assembly, in truth, it was to allow those of the younger generation to spar with one another and further their experiences. Even though Jian Qinsheng did not like the Zhong clan, he still could not help but remark, even though it's clear that they were utilizing the clan assembly as a platform to boast of their prowess, they are indeed a force to be reckoned with. There are simply too few in the younger generation who are able to match their counterparts in the Zhong clan. Most occupation guilds received a couple of invitations. At this point, Zhong Xian could not help but recall what he had heard from Bai Hongyan back then. Back then, when the young prodigy was born, it seemed like they had invited quite a few renowned figures from the various occupations, and her teacher happened to be one of them. The previous Zhong clan's clan assembly happened 20 years ago, during the young prodigy's full-month celebration. Back then, the few students of mine were all defeated by a single person. Recalling the situation back then, a bitter look appeared on Jian Qinsheng's face. Just the direct disciple of the Xingmeng sword saint had been enough to render all of his students completely helpless, and that incident had truly shredded his dignity into many pieces. That matter had been on his mind throughout the years, bubbling furiously inside of him without any avenues to release it. If not for meeting Zhong Xian, there was a good chance that he would never have been able to exact vengeance in his entire lifetime. The young prodigy's full-month celebration. Speaking of which, since you attended the previous clan assembly, did you meet the young prodigy? Zhong Xian asked. Of course I did. Even though he was still very young then, there was an imposing air shrouding him, as if the essence of the heavens was infused right into him. Just a glance at him left me trembling at my core, feeling deeply ashamed of my form. Recalling that sight from 20 years ago, Jian Qinsheng could not help but fall into deep thought. Really, I just can't understand why the Xing sword saint would be blessed with such luck. Not only does he possess amazing aptitude in swordsmanship, he also sure has a way with giving birth. I can tell you that never in my life have I seen a child as talented as that boy, a child who's just barely a month old. Just what kind of talent could he possibly have? Isn't that a little too exaggerated? Zhong Xian's complexion did not look too good. If that child was really as outstanding as Jian Qinsheng made him out to be, his name would have resounded throughout the master-teacher continent by now. How could he not have appeared publicly even once? Exaggerated? Jian Qinsheng shook his head. It's no exaggeration at all. Oh, what I'm saying really comes from the bottom of my heart. If you don't trust me, let me ask you this. Have you ever heard of carnate sainthood? Jian Qinsheng asked. Carnate sainthood? Zhong Xian frowned, unsure of what that term was referring to. It refers to a person born intrinsically with saint realm cultivation, Jian Qinsheng said. Born with saint realm cultivation? How could that be? Zhong Xian narrowed his eyes in astonishment. It had taken him a great deal of effort in order to cultivate to sainthood. Just the fact that it had taken him more than 6 months to do so said a lot about the matter. And yet, there actually existed individuals in the world who were born with saint realm cultivation. Surely not even the heavens would be so biased toward an individual. At the very least, there was not a person whom he knew who was a carnate saint, and this included Luo Ruoxin as well. Indeed. I couldn't believe it the first time I saw it either, but the truth is as such, Jian Qinsheng remarked deeply. At this point, he could not help but recall something, and he remarked, it might seem weird to say this, especially since the young prodigy was only a month old when I saw him, but I must say that there's really some degree of resemblance between you and him. Chapter 1427 It's him. There's some degree of resemblance between me and the young prodigy. Zhong Xian was startled for a moment before he shook his head bitterly. How could that be? He had already checked it with Zhong Zhouxiao's blood essence, and it had already been proven that he was not a member of the Zhong clan. Besides, if he really was the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, how could he have ended up as an orphan in the Tianxian kingdom without a single person looking for him at all? Furthermore, the fact that the young prodigy was a carnate saint further disproved that hypothesis. Zhong Xian could still remember that he had only been at Fighter 3 Danjunchi realm when he first transcended to the master-teacher continent, so how could he possibly be the young prodigy? Well, the young prodigy might have been a person blessed by the heavens, but so what? He would make sure that anyone who dared vie with him for Luo Ruoshin would end up crawling around the floor, searching for his shattered teeth. I'm not saying that you are from the Zhong clan, just that the look in your eyes really resembles that of the young boy I saw back then. But of course, considering how long it has been since then, I think my memory could be failing me too. Jian Qinsheng shook his head and chuckled softly. Considering the talent that the young prodigy harnessed, he would surely be put under the tightest guard of the Zhong clan and put through the strictest of education. There was no way that he would have been allowed to roam outside and become an itinerant cultivator. Unless the Zhong clan had their heads kicked by a donkey, there was no way that they would allow such a thing to happen. While Jian Qinsheng was chatting with Zhong Xian on the back of the aerial Saint Beast, a figure was swiftly flitting toward the cloud-shrouded Zhong clan, and it did not take long for him to arrive at its doorstep. The figure handed a name scroll over and clasped his fist. Yang Shi's butler Hu Yiwei requests an audience with the head of the Zhong clan. It was none other than the man who competed with Sun Qiong for the position of Yang Shi's butler, the left guardian of the Poison Hall, Hu Yiwei. In this instant, he looked completely exhausted, and even his aura seemed to be a little unstable. After leaving the Sanctum of Sages, he did not rush off to look for Yang Shi but headed for the Zhong clan. Looking back, he had been flying for roughly an entire month now. Please give me a moment. Hearing that the visitor was Hu Yiwei, one of the guards hurriedly rushed in, and not too long later, he returned and ushered Hu Yiwei in. Elder, this way please. Yes. Hu Yiwei followed the guard into the courtyard, and after a few twists and turns, he finally arrived at a rather spacious room. In the room, a middle-aged man sat on the main seat, and there was a fatigued look on his face. Upon seeing Hu Yiwei, the middle-aged man stretched his hand forward and said, "Brother Hu, it has been long since we last met. Please, take a seat." Paying respects to the Xing Sword Saint, not daring to carelessly take a seat even at the other party's invitation, Hu Yiwei respectfully clasped his fist and bowed down. He was a 9-star poison master who was capable of causing devastating damage with a wave of his hand, but before the middle-aged man, he dared not pull his weight. Putting aside swordsmanship, just in terms of fighting prowess, he was far from a match against the middle-aged man standing before him. There's no need to stand on ceremony. The middle-aged man waved his hand. I'm here to ask about my master's whereabouts. Half a year ago, when I parted with him, he said that he was heading for the Zhong clan. Hu Yiwei lifted his head and asked, "May I know if he's here at the moment?" Yang Shi is indeed here, but is currently in seclusion. I'm afraid that this wouldn't be a good time to contact him, the middle-aged man replied. Seclusion. Hearing those words, a hint of anxiety flashed across Hu Yiwei's face. It seemed like he had something to say, but he had no idea how he should bring it up. What's wrong? Feel free to speak your mind. Seeing through Hu Yiwei's thoughts, the middle-aged man frowned. Hu Yiwei hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth with determination and revealing, "It's like this. Just a while ago, I found a talented young man who is in his early 20s, and while I'm not too sure about it, I seem to have vaguely sensed the presence of the innate fetal poison that I planted 20 years ago. The innate fetal poison that you have planted." Hearing those words, the middle-aged man immediately stood up from sheer agitation, and his body trembled non-stop. Seemingly unable to believe what he had just heard, he anxiously asked, "Are you certain about it?" "It has been years since I planted the poison, and it has been whittled down to the point that it's extremely weak, but still, I don't think I would make a mistake recognizing it." "I'm quite certain of it," Hu Yiwei said with an affirmative nod. "What's his name, and where is he now?" the middle-aged man asked in agitation. His previous composure had vanished without a trace, and his voice had become a little hurried. "His name is Zhong Xian, and is currently in the Sanctum of Sages," Hu Yiwei said. "Zhong Xian? His name is a little off, but his surname is still Zhong." The middle-aged man frowned for a moment before a thought seemed to have suddenly struck him, and his eyes lit up in excitement and agitation. "It must be him. There's no doubt about it, it must be him. Quick, invite him over to the Zhong clan." Halfway through his instruction, the middle-aged man suddenly halted for a moment before shaking his head. "No, that would take too long. I'll head over there myself." As he said those words, he walked down from his seat as he whipped out a communication jade token and sent a message through it. Not too long later, a middle-aged lady flew over in a fluster. Even though age had left its marks on her, one could still vaguely see traces of the ravishing beauty that she had been in her youth from her face and figure. On top of that, she also carried a sharp disposition reminiscent of an unsheathed sword that would split one in two in an instant. The Meng Sword Saint, Wang Mengya. There's news on him? Is that true? With reddened eyes, Meng Sword Saint questioned him with a deeply apprehensive look, as if frightened to raise her expectations only to have everything come crashing down on her once more. The middle-aged man gestured to Hu Yiwei and said, "Brother Hu said that he encountered a talented young man in his 20s in the Sanctum of Sages, and he sensed the innate fetal poison that he planted back then in him." The Meng Sword Saint anxiously turned her gaze toward Hu Yiwei to seek confirmation. "Madam, I can swear on the heavens that my words are true." Hu Yiwei bowed deeply to the Meng Sword Saint before swiftly going through what he had said earlier once more. By the end of it, Meng Sword Saint's body was already shaking uncontrollably, and her eyes were glistened with tears. With a hoarse voice, she turned to her husband and said in agitation, "It must be him, it's definitely him. I'll be heading off to the Sanctum of Sages right now. Are you coming with me?" "Of course I'm coming as well," the middle-aged man exclaimed. "The clan conference is just about to begin. Aren't you afraid that your old ancestor will be angry if you, the clan head, aren't around?" The Meng Sword Saint harumphed. "We have given up so much for the clan that we should at least be entitled to this much selfishness. We have been searching for him for so many years, and this is the only time we have received concrete news on his whereabouts. If anyone stops me from making my way over, I swear that I'll slice him into shred." The middle-aged man flung his hand backward furiously as a domineering aura flowed forth from him. The sword intent that poured out from him at that instant felt as if it would soar into the heavens and pierce through the boundless sky. "Indeed, we have already done enough for the clan. So many years have passed since then, and we still don't know whether he's living well or starving." At this point, Meng Sword Saint found herself unable to continue any further, and she lowered her head quietly. Droplets of tears dribbled down from her cheeks to the floor. Seeing this, the middle-aged man wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders and said, "Let's go." Then, he waved his free hand. Boom! A furious roar sounded, and a saint beast swiftly appeared right before them. With a leap, the Xing Sword Saint and the Meng Sword Saint leaped onto its back. "Brother Hu, I hope that you can keep what you have just said confidential. Also, I hope that you can keep our whereabouts a secret as well." Standing on top of the aerial beast, the middle-aged man clasped his fist. "Xing Sword Saint, please rest assured. I won't speak a single word of this matter before others." Hu Yiwei nodded. He knew that the unbelievably powerful couple standing before him would surely chase him to the end of the world until he was finally escorted to his grave should he reveal a single word about the matter, so without the slightest bit of hesitation, he accepted their requests. "You have my gratitude for that. If that person you spoke of is the person we have been searching for, the both of us will surely pay you a visit another day to thank you," the middle-aged man said. "Also, you need not worry about Yangsha. He's currently cultivating in the Zhong clan, and I can tell you for certain that his safety is guaranteed. You can stay here without worry. I have already informed him to look for you once he's out of his seclusion." "Thank you, Xing Sword Saint." Hu Yiwei clasped his fist. Yuan, the middle-aged man, nodded before tapping his feet lightly. Hula. The next instant, the saint beast immediately surged forth toward the skyline, heading in the direction of the Sanctum of Sages. Shortly into their flight, they saw a saint beast flying in the opposite direction as them. Recognizing the saint beast, the middle-aged man's eyebrows knitted together. "It's Zhen Qinsheng's cloud-light saint beast." Chapter 1428 The 5 Classifications of Swordsmanship. Zhen Qinsheng, that obstinate fellow? Let's take a detour around him. If we bump into him, we will end up wasting a great deal of time. Right now, I only want to meet Zhongxian. The Meng Sword Saint nodded in agreement. "All right. Knowing that an encounter with Jian Qinsheng would probably dredge up all of their old grudges and stall them significantly, the middle-aged man tapped his feet lightly. The aerial saint beast that they were riding on immediately dived into the clouds, disappearing without a trace. In the portable room on the cloud-light saint beast, a deep frown suddenly appeared on Jian Qinsheng's forehead. "What's wrong?" Zhong Xian asked. Under normal circumstances, no one would keep their spiritual perception active at all times, so he did not notice the saint beast ahead of them diving into the clouds. "It seems like a rather powerful aerial saint beast that was in our path has flown away." Jian Qinsheng shook his head. "It's fine. It's good that it didn't notice us, or else we would have been in deep trouble." As the head of the Zhong clan, the Xing sword saint had multiple saint beasts under his command, and the one that he was currently riding on happened to be one that Jian Qinsheng did not recognize. On top of that, they were quite some distance away from one another, so Jian Qinsheng was unable to accurately discern the people riding on the saint beast. There was, however, only one thing that Jian Qinsheng was certain of: the saint beast that had just moved out of their path possessed far greater strength than the cloud-light saint beast that he was currently riding on. To wield greater strength and yet simply turn around and leave, it was likely that the other party had not noticed them. Otherwise, they would have been in for a tough battle. Even though his cultivation had reached Saint Realm and he could fly freely without fear of plummeting to the ground, it was still rather disadvantageous for them to fight against a powerful aerial saint beast in the skies. If it was possible to avoid a fight, it would be best to do so. "That's fortunate." Having understood this, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Deciding not to pay too much heed to the saint beast that had been in their path earlier, Jian Qinsheng swiftly confirmed their location and said with a chuckle, "We're not too far away from the Zhong clan anymore. As long as we speed up a little, we should be able to arrive in half a day's time. Elder Jian, since we are going to compete with the Zhong clan in the field of swordsmanship, may I know what outstanding sword practitioners there are in Zhong clan and what kind of sword quintessence they have comprehended?" Zhong Xian asked. "Know one's strength and one's opponent, and one would attain 100 victories in 100 wars." He did not think that there were any sword practitioners in the same cultivation realm who were capable of matching him, but it was still best to tread carefully. Otherwise, if he ended up being defeated by those small fries, what right would he have to challenge that young prodigy and vie for Luo Ruoxin's hand in marriage? He only had a single goal for this trip to the Zhong clan: establishing dominance. As such, nothing could go wrong. Even if that young prodigy appeared in the clan assembly, he would ensure that the other party learned of his prowess. Currently, in the younger generation of the Zhong clan, the person who possesses the deepest understanding of swordsmanship is Zhong Shu. The Xingmeng sword saints once offered him pointers in his swordsmanship. Jian Qinsheng harumphed. "He's also the fellow who came to my residence before, wanting to access my library, only to be chased away by me." "Zhong Shu?" Zhong Xian pondered for a moment before nodding. He had heard of the matter between Zhong Shu and Jian Qinsheng from Shui Qianrou, and it was precisely due to that incident that led to him thinking that Jian Qinsheng had an eccentric temper. From the looks of it now, it was rather clear that it was not on a whim that Jian Qinsheng chased Zhong Shu away. Given the deep grudge between him and the head of the Zhong clan, it was only natural that he would not be too fond of the offspring of the Zhong clan. That's right. In total, sword quintessences can be divided into 5 main classifications. The old sword maestro's devastating offensive swordsmanship and ancestor Liu Shirei's impregnable defensive swordsmanship correspond to strength and defense respectively. Other than that, there are also dexterity, speed, and void, Jian Qinsheng explained grimly. Void. Hearing a foreign term, Zhong Xian could not help being confused. He could roughly comprehend what dexterity and speed entailed, but what would void be? To be honest, I don't have a clear grasp of what void is at the moment either. In the present day and age, it could be said to be somewhat like a legend among sword practitioners. Rumor has it that Kong Shi reached this level back then, and with just a casual swing of his blade, even if his swing wasn't fast, was lacking in strength, and was riddled with loopholes, his slash would still, by some inexplicable phenomenon, be able to overcome his opponent's move with ease. Jian Qinsheng explained. Only that which is truly non-existent can be considered as void. If my guess fails me not, in order to comprehend a void quintessence, one must fuse the other 4 quintessences together. However, just comprehending a single quintessence would already take a sword practitioner an entire life's worth of time and effort. To comprehend 4 at once, to be honest, other than Kongsha, I don't think that there's anyone in this world who is capable of doing that. I see. Zhong Xian nodded. He had comprehended 2 sword quintessences, and in the field of swordsmanship, he was by no means weaker than Jian Qinsheng. Even though the latter's description was very vague, he was still able to form a decent picture of what the latter was talking about. While sword quintessence was commonly known as the pinnacle of swordsmanship on the master-teacher continent, it did not mean that it was the end of the road for sword practitioners. Those who had achieved sword quintessence would only come to realize that there were limitations to the current path of swordsmanship that they were pursuing, and there was still a greater peak above them. Most likely, the void sword quintessence was a concept that would push one closer to that peak. The sword quintessence that the Zhong clan specializes in is speed. The swordsmanship that they execute pushes their speed to the extremes, to the point where the concept of time seemed to fall apart. It is due to this that the Zhong clan's swordsmanship is deeply feared on the master-teacher continent. Speed. Zhong Xian's face turned grim. The Zhong clan's unique bloodline was capable of controlling the flow of time. He had experienced that for himself, and without a doubt, it was an incredible ability. Most likely, the speed sword quintessence that they comprehended had something to do with their unique bloodline. As the saying goes, of all martial arts in the world, there is no might that cannot be overcome, only true speed stands undefeated. Speed would always be one of the crucial factors that determined the outcome of a battle. For example, as powerful as Zhong Xian's sea-severing sword was, it required lengthy preparation before it was ready for execution. If his opponent moved fast enough, it was possible to his opponent to interrupt him in the midst of his preparation. Indeed, the speed of their swordsmanship tears down the very boundaries of time, such that even the flowing water swordsmanship wouldn't be able to hold its grounds too long against it before being breached. On top of that, any attempts to launch a counterattack would only be rendered futile by their absolute speed. This is also the reason my students suffered a tragic loss the last time around. Jian Qinsheng shook his head. Even though he knew where the foundation of the Zhong clan's swordsmanship lay, he simply was not able to find a sure-proof way to break it. If that's the case, doesn't it mean that it's impossible to achieve victory? Zhong Xian frowned. If even you are completely helpless against the Zhong clan's swordsmanship, even if I'm slightly stronger than you, it should be impossible for me to win against them too, right? It wouldn't be easy to achieve victory, but it's definitely not impossible. Other than the void sword quintessence, the remaining 4 types of sword quintessences are able to curb one another. By itself, it would be difficult for your strength sword quintessence to stand against the overwhelming speed of the Zhong clan. However, if it is used together with the flowing water swordsmanship as well, there is a good chance that you will be able to overcome their speed sword quintessence, Jian Qinsheng said. On the other hand, Zhong Xian frowned in confusion. It was just a moment ago that he felt that it would be difficult for him to achieve victory because it would simply take too long for him to charge up sufficient momentum to launch the sea-severing sword. How would the flowing water swordsmanship make any difference? You are cornered by your own train of thought. Seeing how even the usually knowledgeable young man would have his moments of foolishness, Jian Qinsheng could not help but chuckle softly. By itself, the flowing water swordsmanship isn't sufficient to fend off the Zhong clan's swordsmanship for too long, but all you need is just to stall your opponent for several breaths. As long as you can gather sufficient strength during this period of time to launch the old sword maestro's ultimate technique, you should be able to subdue your opponent easily. The speed sword quintessence is formidable, but it isn't infallible. Before the might of your sword art, there's no doubt that you will be able to easily subdue your opponent. This. Widening his eyes in realization, Zhong Xian could not help but burst into laughter. Indeed, he had been thinking of the 2 sword quintessences as separate entities, so he had failed to consider this point. As long as he could use the 2 sword quintessences with one another, their might could be brought up to a whole new level. The tight defense of the flowing water swordsmanship and the crushing power of the old sword maestro's sword art. As long as he could buy sufficient time to launch the sea-severing sword, No matter how fast his opponent was able to move, the other party would still be rendered completely powerless under the relentless onslaught of sword chi. Chapter 1429. Arriving at the Zhong clan, so, when fighting with those of the Zhong clan, you can use the flowing water swordsmanship to first protect yourself as you prepare for a counterattack with the sea-severing sword. As long as you time your blade well, even Zhong Shu will struggle to match you, Jian Qinsheng said. Even though none of his students were able to deal with the sword practitioners of the Zhong clan, the young man before him had the ability to do so. As someone who had comprehended two different types of sword quintessences, the young man's mastery of swordsmanship was far above his. As long as the young man was able to complement his two sword quintessences with one another impeccably, he would be invincible among his peers. Even if the young man faced the Xingmeng sword saint at the same cultivation realm, Jian Qinsheng was confident that the young man would be able to eventually achieve victory. Unless the Xingmeng sword saint had managed to comprehend two sword quintessences as well, he would not stand a chance against the young man at all. However, I would also like to highlight that Zhong Shu is only the strongest sword practitioner from the Zhong clan who has enrolled into the Sanctum of Sages, so he might not necessarily be the best sword practitioner in the Zhong clan. Thus, you mustn't underestimate your opponents once we are there. At this point, Jian Qinsheng's expression suddenly turned grim. This is especially so for the young prodigy of the Zhong clan. So far, there's still no concrete news about him yet, and if I'm not mistaken, there's a good chance that he might appear in this clan conference. After all, this is a good opportunity for the Zhong clan to build up the reputation of the young prodigy ahead of the marriage with the Luo clan's little princess. Young prodigy? Indeed. The previous clan conference held by the Zhong clan was during the young prodigy's full-month celebration, and it served as a declaration of strength to the rest of the world. In the 20 years since then, there has been absolutely no news about the young prodigy, so I suspect that this is an intentional ploy from the Zhong clan in order to build a powerful entrance for him. As long as the young prodigy is able to display overwhelming strength during this clan conference, the prestige of the Zhong clan will be brought to an entirely different level, Jian Qinsheng said. Hearing those words, Zhong Xian narrowed his eyes. The other party was right. Considering the usual shameless shenanigans that the Zhong clan resorted to, this was indeed something that sounded like what they would do. Intentionally hiding the young prodigy from view so as to create some controversy and confusion, only to bring him out at the crucial moment so as to solidify their reputation once and for all. Carnate Saint. To be honest, it would be a lie if Zhong Xian said that he did not feel the slightest bit of stress at having to face the young prodigy of the Zhong clan. After all, Luo Ruoxin had been able to reach a realm far higher than the current him despite not being a carnate saint. Considering the talent and resources that the young prodigy had at his disposal, just what kind of realm could he have reached by now? Noticing the unnatural look on Zhong Xian's face, Jian Qinsheng attempted to console him. You don't have to worry too much about the young prodigy. It isn't much for you to lose to him. Not even Kong Shi was born as a carnate saint. Even if you can't compete with him, no one will say anything about it. However, Jian Qinsheng's consolation only served to make Zhong Xian's complexion even more awful. Losing to that fellow who was only good for bragging? Dream on. Elder Jian, do you happen to have any phantasmal space realm cultivation technique manuals? Zhong Xian asked grimly. He had already reinforced his Saint 6 Dan Grand Dominion realm cultivation for more than 20 days. Since it was likely for the young prodigy to appear, he would really have to think of a way to make a breakthrough in preparation of a fight against the other party. Otherwise, he probably would not stand a chance at all. Phantasmal Space Realm Cultivation Technique Manuals? I only happen to have one of them, and it was left behind by my ancestor. Knowing that the young man had an interest in reading, Jian Qinsheng was not surprised by the request at all. With a flick of his wrist, he took out a book and passed it over. Thank you. Zhong Xian took the book and collected it into the Library of Heaven's Path. It was indeed a Phantasmal Space Realm Cultivation Technique Manual, and it was of a particularly high tier. What was unique about this cultivation technique was that it harnessed sword intent, so it was probably a unique cultivation technique passed down in the other party's lineage. With a thought, Zhongxian swiftly compiled the various phantasmal space realm cultivation technique manuals that he had together. There's still a flaw in the Saint Seven Dan Heaven's Path divine art. Zhongxian frowned. He had already gathered quite a few phantasmal space realm cultivation technique manuals a while back and compiled them into a Heaven's Path divine art, but due to the limited number of books in his possession, there had still been several flaws with it. Perhaps due to the high tier of the cultivation technique manual from Jian Qinsheng, it had managed to resolve most of the flaws, leaving just a single one behind. Just as Zhongxian was about to take a closer look at the flaw and ponder on how it could be resolved, he suddenly heard Jian Qinsheng's voice once more. "Oh right, I almost forgot about it. You won't be challenging the Zhong clan under the identity as my student but as my senior from the same lineage." Senior. Surprised by those words, Zhongxian raised his head to look at Jian Qinsheng. "You were able to learn the flowing water swordsmanship just by studying the sword character on the wall. This is a feat that even I'm incapable of pulling off, so naturally, I am unqualified to have you treat me as your teacher. Since that's the case, it's much better to have you come as my senior instead. This way, it will be less likely for us to get exposed," Jian Qinsheng said. Considering how his mastery of swordsmanship was not even close to matching up to the young man's, it would clearly be inappropriate to have the young man play the role of his student. Just the fact that the young man had learned the flowing water swordsmanship through comprehending the sword meant that the young man had inherited his ancestors' most direct heritage. From such a viewpoint, it was not exactly wrong for him to address the young man as his senior. Understanding Jian Qinsheng's intentions, Zhongxian nodded. To him, the identity that he used to enter the Zhong clan did not matter at all. As long as he could teach them a lesson, he would not mind anything at all. After explaining what needed to be explained, Jian Qinsheng said, "All right, I think you should rest for a moment. Things will get really hectic once we arrive at the Zhong clan." Zhongxian nodded silently before closing his eyes to condition his state. Not too long later, his body suddenly jolted, and soon after, he felt an immense pressure crushing down on him from the air. He hurriedly opened his eyes, and soon, he heard a voice booming across the air. "May I know which friend is approaching? Please report your name so that we can register you." Through the windows, Zhongxian could see several old men standing atop another aerial saint beast some distance away, and they were currently looking at them with clasped fists. It was difficult for him to gauge how powerful they were from where he stood, but he could sense that their power had locked down the surrounding space, making it impossible for them to barge past them. "I am Jian Qinsheng from the Sanctum of Sages. I have been invited here by the Xing Sword Saint, and here is my invitation letter." Jian Qinsheng flicked his wrist and tossed a jade token over. One of the elders caught the jade token and examined it carefully before replying, "Ah, so it's Sword Saint Jian. I'm deeply apologetic for our rudeness. This way please. I'll be troubling you then." Nodding, Jian Qinsheng prompted the saint beast beneath him to slowly continue moving forward. Zhongxian took a look at the scenery ahead, and he soon noticed a massive city appearing on the horizon. This city was located against the mountains, which bestowed it with a majestic aura. There were many formations erected all over it, such that it would be nigh impossible for Saint Nine Dan or even real 9-star master teachers to breach it. The base of the Zhong clan is also known as Dracotija City. The formations cast over the city were personally set up by the ancestor of the Zhong clan, and the prowess they harness is unimaginable, Jian Qinsheng explained through Zhenqi telepathy. The group that we encountered earlier are the elders of the Zhong clan. Even though it might appear that they are welcoming their guests, the truth is that they are flaunting their strength to the rest of the world so as to construct an inviolable image. Zhongxian nodded. Through tapping into the prowess of the surrounding formations, the elders emanated an aura that felt as if they wielded absolute control within the area. Those whose mental resilience was slightly weaker might even have found themselves feeling deferential toward the Zhong clan, giving up all thoughts of resistance against them. And once this thought was born within one's mind, it would be hard to overlook it anymore. What huge airs they are putting up! To be flaunting their strength even to their guests. Really, where did they learn their manners? Zhongxian harumphed coldly as they glanced at the massive formations ahead of him. Proper etiquette dictated that a host should offer the most earnest welcome to their guests, but instead of doing so, the Zhong clan chose to put down their guests instead. This felt extremely distasteful to Zhong Xian. Very well. Since this is the game you want to play, let's see how far you can go. Staring at the formation intently, Zhong Xian willed in his mind, flaws. Who? A book materialized in the library of Heaven's Path. Chapter 1430, Challenging the Formation, Grade 9 Defensive Formation Dual Spirit Heaven Dominating Formation, set up by the old ancestor of the Zhong clan. The formation harnesses the might of both dragons and tigers, and for this reason, it's also known as the Dracotiger Formation. The might of the formation makes it difficult for Saint Nindan cultivators to overcome it. Flaws. Number 1, it requires a high input of spiritual energy in order to sustain the formation. Number 2, the heart of the formation is sustained by a dragon spirit and a tiger spirit. While this allows the formation to be more flexible to different situations, it also means that the formation will be swayed by the wills of the two spirits. Number 3. Information concerning the formation surged into Zhong Xian's mind. All in all, there were 17 flaws to the dual spirit heaven dominating formation. As a grade 9 formation, it had already developed its own spirit. As time went by, the spirit would gradually grow stronger and stronger, and it would instinctively remove or mitigate any perceived flaws that it noticed. As a result of that, even if one knew the flaws of the formation, it still would not be easy to exploit them. This formation can be considered one of the stronger ones even among grade 9 formations, Zhong Xian grimly remarked in his heart. The formation turned out to be far stronger than he had expected. While he had not seen the blueprint of any Guard 9 formations yet, the might and transformations harnessed within the formation before him had already far surpassed his imagination. I'll have to study it carefully first. Just as Zhong Xian was about to take a closer look at the dual spirit heaven dominating formation, the elder who had spoken to them earlier suddenly flew over and clasped his fist. Esteemed guests, please hand over your storage rings. Please rest assured that we'll seal them right before you so as to ensure that we won't inspect or take anything from them, and we'll return them to you when you leave. You want us to hand over our storage rings? Zhong Xian frowned. Several of his secrets were concealed within his storage ring, and he brought it wherever he went. Yet, to have to hand it over just to enter the Zhong clan, was this not a little too domineering? The elder nodded. Indeed. This is a rule in the Zhong clan. If you wish to step across the Dracotiger formation, you'll have to hand over your storage rings. Don't worry, the Zhong clan has everything you need. You will be able to use our items easily once you familiarize yourself with them, so there's no need to worry. Noticing the awful look on Zhong Xian's face, Zhen Qinsheng took out his storage ring and passed it over to the elder as he explained the matter telepathically to him. This isn't a rule imposed just by the Zhong clan. Most major blessed lands have such restrictions as well. Outsiders are expected to take off their storage ring, and in more extreme cases, they might be prohibited from bringing their weapons along. He had been to the Zhong clan before, so he was well aware of the rules. Many other major organizations, such as the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, enforced similar rules, too. Firstly, it was a symbol of respect to the host. Secondly, it was to avoid possible menace from getting into the base. Many years ago, there had been a master teacher who had been blackmailed by the otherworldly demonic tribe to bring a storage ring filled with a massive army of otherworldly demons into one of the strongholds of humanity. That incident had resulted in huge losses for that stronghold, and they had almost completely been wiped out. Considering that the Zhong clan was the #1 sage clan of the master teacher continent, they were definitely one of the major targets that the otherworldly demonic tribe would want to bring down. Even if they were confident in their strength, it would still be best for them to maintain a high level of wariness. Watching as the elder took the ring from Zhen Qinsheng and sealed it without peeking into what was inside, Zhong Xian asked with a frown, "What if I refuse to hand over my storage rings?" Stored in his ring was Vicious Head, the Qiu Wu Palace, and many other secrets. He could not afford to let any one of these secrets get exposed. Even though the elder had said that he would only seal the storage ring, there was still a good chance that something might go wrong should he leave the storage ring with the other party. Furthermore, considering that the purpose of his visit was to challenge the Zhong clan, there was no guarantee that the latter would not attempt to peek into his storage ring after a falling out, and that could place him in grave danger. As unlikely as those scenarios were, Zhong Xian still felt that the Zhong clan was too shameless to be trusted. It's fine if you don't want to leave behind your storage ring. As long as you can clear our formation trial, you'll be permitted to bring your possessions into the Zhong clan, the elder replied nonchalantly, not showing the slightest hint of anger at Zhong Xian's rude question. It appeared that there were quite a few guests before him who had refused to leave behind their storage rings too, and the elder was accustomed to dealing with such problems. Formation trial? Zhong Xian asked doubtfully. The Zhong clan has a defensive formation which is able to detect and fend off both cultivators and spatial artifacts. If anyone attempts to barge through the formation with a storage ring in possession, they will find themselves completely suppressed by the formation, even if they are a Saint 9 Dan cultivator. Formation trial simply means walking through the formation with a spatial artifact in your possession, Jian Qinsheng said. While he was speaking, another group of cultivators, who were unwilling to hand over their storage rings just like Zhong Xian, began making their way toward the defensive formation. Recognizing the other party's identity, Jian Qinsheng said in a hushed voice, "That's an elder from the Empire Alliance. He wields strength that's on par with me. Hula." The instant the elder stepped into the formation, his surroundings immediately burst into flames. A golden crimson dragon of flames dived down from the heavens, and its sharp talons tore through the air, crushing the space around the elder so tight that it robbed his ability to breathe. Shocked by the destructive might wielded by the formation, panic visibly appeared on the elder's face. He hurriedly flicked his wrist to draw a sword before swinging it desperately, sending a furious torrent of sword chi forward. Despite the elder's lack of composure, the strength that he wielded was remarkable. Not even the mighty Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast would not dare face him straight on. Even so, the strength that he commanded was trifling before the massive flame dragon. In just 2 clashes, he was already struck in the head and plummeted straight down from the sky, charred. At the same time, under the raging assault of the flames, the storage ring that he wore also exploded, and the possessions that he had stored within it fell and scattered all over the ground. Due to the lingering heat and shockwave from the clash with the flame dragon, quite a number of them ended up sustaining severe damage. After which, the flame dragon dissipated into nothingness, and the formation reverted to its original form. One of the Zhong clan elders walked over to the Empire Alliance elder with an impassive look on his face. "Now that you don't have a storage ring anymore, feel free to enter." The Empire Alliance elder meditated for a moment to recover from the injuries that he had sustained before walking into the Zhong clan with an awful look on his face. And as expected, the formation didn't launch any attacks toward him anymore. Jian Qinsheng's face paled upon seeing that sight, and he quickly turned to Zhong Xian. "Zhongshu, you should hand your storage ring over. They will definitely prepare a suitable sword for you later on, so you don't have to worry about not having a suitable weapon for the fight." An elder whose strength was on the same level as him did not even manage to survive 2 blows in the formation before being knocked out. Even if the young man before him was a prodigious swordmaster, his cultivation was simply far too lacking. He would surely be ravaged should he challenge the formation. The elder shot an impassive glance at Zhong Xian and said, "Hand over your storage ring or attempt to barge through the formation, the choice is up to you. However, I would just like to say that the Zhong clan won't be responsible for the consequences." He believed that the young man would know what was best for him, especially after witnessing what had happened to the Saint 8 Dan elder from the Empire Alliance. "The Zhong clan won't be responsible for the consequences?" Zhong Xian raised his head and asked earnestly, "Are you certain?" The elder frowned upon hearing such a bizarre question, unsure of what the young man was getting at. Nevertheless, he still nodded. "I'm sure. Are you qualified to speak on the behalf of the entire Zhong clan?" Zhong Xian continued asking. Cough, cough, Zhongsha. "The elder over there is the 3rd elder of the Zhong clan, Zhong Wuchen." Horrified, Jian Qinsheng hurriedly explained to Zhong Xian, given his position, he's definitely more than qualified to speak on the behalf of the entire Zhong clan. The third elder of the Zhong clan? His words should carry some weight then. Zhong Xian pondered for a moment before nodding slowly. A smile crept on his lips as he turned to the Zhong Wuchen and said, I have made up my mind. Since you have said that the Zhong clan won't be responsible for the consequences, I shall challenge the formation trial. In the Zhong clan, the ranking of the elders was decided by their strength, and the seniority of their positions was proportionate to the authority that they wielded. Considering that the elder before him was the third elder of the Zhong clan, he certainly had the authority to speak on behalf of the entire clan. You are going to challenge the formation trial? Jian Qinsheng's face paled. With a deeply anxious look on his face, he urged, Zhongshe, you mustn't. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,